The same problem that Maria says. We don't have labor for harvesting in Andalusia right now.
But it looks very different, doesn't it? It changes the landscape, the traditional landscape of Andalusia. Do you feel sad about that?
It's a pity, but it's the progress. If you see other crops like cotton or like wheat, they are in some point of the history, they are being mechanized. So progress is that. So I mean, this is not being stoppable.
That's a different sound.
That's the bells.
That's the bells, yes. Traditional harvesting with mules.
Before we leave Andalusia, we make a trip up into the mountains north of Cordoba. 10 mules, their livery embroidered with red thread, are tethered together and make their way down the steep hillside to collect sacks of harvested olives, then climb back up carrying their precious cargo. The animals belong to Andrés Garcia and his friend.
Todo secano y ya está, la gente lo arregla lo mejor posible y lo
Everything
sacamos,
here
mi
is
compañero y yo
rain-fed, so farmers try to fix the trees and take care of them as best as they can. And then my mate and me, we come with the mules because it's a slopey land, so you can only harvest with mules because tractors can't go in.
Andrés isn't worried about being replaced by machines. That'll never happen here.
Sorry,
But
Corey and I are
his
both.
livelihood isn't guaranteed. If vast swathes of the Spanish countryside are turned over to intensive and mechanized olive production, the farmers Andrés works for could find themselves under olives, priced out of the market. And everyone in this industry is looking at the sky. The weather and climate will determine so much. That's all from Assignment. I'm Esperanza Escribano.
And I'm Linda Presley.
That was Assignment from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho, and this is CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We are live downtown with our team. Periods of light snow and blowing snow should end this afternoon in Winnipeg. Sure was pretty, though. Made everything nice and snowy and white. A high of minus 12 today, again, just like yesterday. And winds will diminish a bit this afternoon as well. So that's what we're expecting. There is still a bit of a snowfall warning around parts of the Interlake, mostly around the lakes. So you'll note that. And, of course, you might be shoveling still in Westman and around Riding Mountain up through Dauphin. Well, thanks for joining us. That's the weather. And 3 minutes to 6, we're on air till 8:37 this morning. Let's say good morning to the team. Corey Funk, good morning. Corey is our show director and also is on the air covering the commute. Good morning to Abby Adiemi. Morning, Abby. Abby's behind the controls and covers the weather on the air. And good morning to Kevin Ipatebo, who's also here. Hey, Kev. Kev's our YouTube producer. All right, let's blow ourselves over into the newsroom. I'm still thinking about the weather. But Heather's here with other headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, just off the phone with Winnipeg Police. They are in the Osborne Village area, the 100 block of Osborne, where they are investigating this morning an assault with a weapon. The victim is in hospital, not sure about the extent of his injuries. Police expect to be in the area for most of the day. So that's in the 100 block of Osborne, the east side of the street there. We'll have more on that as that story develops. As well, a lumber owner in southern Manitoba is feeling uncertainty around possible U.S. tariffs, and he says so do his customers. Joel Hartung owns the Zone Lumber Yards in 3 different Manitoba centres, and he's been fielding calls from customers with questions related to tariffs, asking to secure orders for later this year. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, still staying with tariffs, we're now looking at different businesses that are being affected, and coming up at 10 to 8 this morning, we're going to hear more from a window manufacturer in Steinbach, long-time business there, Lowen Windows, and how they could be affected. They do, I think the number is 85% of their business with the state. So we're going to dig into that story. Also, in this morning's show, a University of Manitoba research team working on HIV/AIDS prevention in Nairobi is at risk of losing their funding. Why? Because it comes from the United States. So we're going to find out more about what they've heard and why they're worried about losing it. Stay tuned. It's all still ahead.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
There were a bunch of people that inspired Rufus Wainwright to write his first Requiem. Lord Byron, Verdi, and Puccini, his dog. Rufus will tell you why at the end of the day he realized what he was really doing was mourning the death of the American dream.
It's just this, collapse of what America was.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The Secretary General of the United Nations has a warning for U.S. President Donald Trump and his plans to take over Gaza.
In the search for solutions, we must not make the problem worse. It is essential to avoid any form of ethnic cleansing.
Antonio Guterres is calling on the UN to reaffirm its commitment to a two-state solution. But it appears the Israeli government is already preparing for some Palestinians to leave Gaza. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik is following developments in Jerusalem.
Facing winter winds and piles of debris, the frustration of living in Gaza boils over for Mohammed Abu Taima, trying to keep his tent from blowing away. Even with a ceasefire, trying to rebuild is a nightmare, says Ghada El Cord. She admits even she has thought of leaving.
If we don't have a decent life as soon as possible, I think most of the Gazan here will think to leave and live abroad in a better life.
That is the debate in Gaza and in Israel now, in the wake of U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal that the U.S. remove some 2 million Palestinians to rebuild and redevelop what he calls the Riviera of the Middle East. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has ordered the military to prepare a plan for what he calls the voluntary departure of Gazans. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also seems to have embraced the idea.
What's wrong with that? They can leave, they can then come back, they can relocate and come back.
But Israel has a history of not allowing Palestinians to return, and settler groups have already drawn up their own plans for occupying Gaza. That's why Arab countries like Jordan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia have flatly rejected the Trump plan. For Riyad Mansour, the Palestinian representative to the UN, it's emotional.
We love the land of our country, whether we have palaces on it or destroyed buildings. We are determined to rebuild it.
But even if the ceasefire lasts, that could take years. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Canadian border security is in the spotlight, and the RCMP is putting on a show. It is releasing details about some recent incidents. The Mounties and the CBSA have their work on display. As Cameron McIntosh tells us, the PR push is targeting an audience south of the border, the Trump administration.
You can see in the map there that
RCMP Assistant Commissioner Lisa Moreland points to a video screen. You can see a thermal camera image of 6 hotspots moving through a wooded area.
A group of 6 individuals were heading towards the Manitoba border.
Shot from a plane, RCMP directed officers on the ground to intercept. An example of border technology RCMP are very keen to draw attention to.
The RCMP is committed to using every available technology and asset to secure the border.
She says RCMP in Alberta were also involved in 2 recent border apprehensions, one using fixed cameras. RCMP make a lot of border arrests, usually don't go this big. But with U.S. President Donald Trump fixated on securing the shared border, threatening tariffs, there's pressure. Christian Luprecht is an expert on border security.
The much more important audience is likely a U.S. audience, and in particular the White House.
For the RCMP, that's meant showing off a couple of newly leased Black Hawk helicopters. Well, earlier this week,
we share the longest border in the world.
Federal Public Safety Minister David McGuinty allowed cameras in as he spoke to RCMP and border agents at the Emerson border crossing in Manitoba about shifting priorities.
The president will continue on his path. We are executing on a plan here.
A plan not just to strengthen the border, but to be seen to be doing it. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
In the U.S., it is decision day for millions of federal workers. Today's the deadline to accept a buyout offered by Elon Musk. He heads up the Trump administration's newly created Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. If workers don't take the offer, they risk being fired. Either way, the civil service could face a drastic reduction. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington. And Richard, what is likely to happen today?
Yeah, it's fight or flight for the federal workforce. And it's believed roughly 40,000 government workers have accepted buyouts, which is far short of Elon Musk's ambitious goal of cutting roughly 200,000 jobs, or 10% of the federal workforce. So perhaps a whole new round of pink slips will be issued instead. Now, many legal experts are questioning the terms because those who accept the buyout have to sign a waiver agreeing not to take legal action. They're also skeptical if workers will actually get severance because it could be delayed by lawsuits. Now, in the past 2.5 weeks, we've seen Musk and his team completely dismantle several government agencies, from USAID, Treasury, Labor, intelligence agencies, the FBI, and CIA. Critics say this unelected billionaire is destroying institutions without congressional oversight or even a plan. Here's Michigan Senator Alyssa Slotkin.
They're trying to shrink the government. But again, when you start telling people that they're making these offers to flight safety instructors or the people who test our water, and they're not going to be replaced, that's the goal, right? People say, well, wait a minute, is there no rhyme or reason to the way we're doing this?
Now, critics are describing Musk and his team of 20-somethings that they're treating government like a tech startup, stripping each agency for parts and even gaining access to sensitive databases and intel of Musk's corporate competitors.
So what is Musk and DOGE expected to target next?
Yeah, there's new reporting this morning that Musk is targeting the National Institutes of Health and the Centers for Disease Control, and his team are reviewing their operations. Some agencies are now scrambling to get restraining orders, and more protests are expected later today.
All right, thank you, Richard.
You bet.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. RCMP in New Brunswick say they're searching for 2 armed men. One is 50-year-old Leo Carrier. He is believed to be with another man in a black 2018 Dodge Ram with no license plates. The individuals may be traveling in the direction of Edmundston from Barrie Mills. Police have issued an emergency alert advising the public not to approach the men, but to call 911 immediately if they see them. Another month and another record global temperature set. Scientists with EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service say last month was the world's warmest January ever. It was 0.1 degrees Celsius hotter than the same period last year. The evidence surprises scientists who predicted a cooler January. They thought last year's La Niña effect would bring global temperatures down. Samantha Burgess is with Copernicus.
When we look at air temperatures across the globe, we've seen really large anomalies, particularly over the Arctic region, where those anomalies have been 20 degrees above average. So that's a huge anomaly. So that combined gave us an insight early on in the month that January would be much warmer than average.
January is the 18th month out of the last 19 recording an average global temperature more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times. Scientists say the burning of fossil fuels remains the largest contributing factor to the warming climate. And climate change is having an impact on the push to build new affordable homes across Canada. A new study warns thousands of those buildings could be constructed in areas threatened by natural disasters. The Canadian Climate Institute says the threat could result in billions of dollars in damage. Anayat Singh has more.
Floods in Toronto last year drove home the dangers of climate-induced disasters that homeowners are increasingly facing. Now, a new report from the Canadian Climate Institute says thousands of new homes may get built in flood and fire risk areas. Report author Ryan Ness says governments need to step in.
Many provinces and territories don't use their full authority. They do not create regulations that limit the amount of construction that can occur in hazard-prone areas.
The fix is to direct development away from those areas and give information to municipalities and home buyers.
The state of flood and wildfire hazard mapping in this country is pretty poor. Maps that do exist are often dated by decades.
And billions of dollars are on the line because all those risky homes could cost homeowners and insurance companies big time. Charmaline Mendes-Millard is the director of flood advocacy group Partners for Action.
We're going to be facing and continuing to face so many events that are overwhelming our resources and systems.
A call to heed the report's warning so all those new homes don't cause a crisis of their own. Inayat Singh, CBC News, Toronto.
That is the latest from World Report. This month, we are asking you to follow World Report wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us reach new listeners and helps you stay on top of the day's big stories. I'm Marcia Young. This is CBC News.
Well, hello, everybody, and good morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live downtown in Winnipeg, and we have another mild day ahead. Thanks so much for joining us here on the show. You're on CBC. So this hour on the program, there's a local comedian that is putting on a musical comedy show featuring local talent. The twist is everyone in the show is neurodivergent. And that comes out in their work as well. And this is a producer that's been bringing neurodivergent comedy shows to our community for the last number of years. So we'll find out more about this one. And Corey was just working on pulling some music. So we're also going to hear a bit of a performance, a little bit from one of the performers, rather, coming up. So we all need a little bit of a bright in these times, don't we? Also, this hour on the show, we're going to talk about this time next year when the Winter Olympics kick off in Milan Cortina in Italy. So we're going to chat with Anastasia Busis from CBC Sports about some of the Canadians who are expected to shine. Right now, Heather Wells has our headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a large police presence in Osborne Village as police investigate an assault with a weapon. It happened around 5 this morning in the 100 block of Osborne. Police say the victim is in hospital. It's not known how badly he was hurt. Police say there are multiple witnesses and officers expect to be in the area for much of the morning. They say you should still be able to get through that area, though, as if you're driving through there. The continued threat of steep U.S. tariffs has workers at one of Steinbach's biggest employers worried about layoffs. The 700 employees at Lowen Windows know they are not out of the woods. President and CEO Neil Fast says he would only consider cutting staff as a last resort. About 85% of Lowen's products, he says, now go to the U.S. We'll hear more from him in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
How you liking the weather, Heather Wells?
You know what? It's not bad. I love being able to step outside and not, feel like I'm going to turn into an icicle.
Right? Exactly. Last night, let's turn to Abby for the weather now. We'll check in with Heather in a bit. Thanks, Heath. Last night, Abby, I had one of my people in my life, our electrician, is full disclosure, but he was out walking his dog, and it was right when the snow was coming down really beautifully. It was quite pretty last night.
Yeah, it was quite pretty last night, and pretty not too cold. So if you're outside, you're just going to feel more of that fluffiness on your skin. I actually went outside just for some fresh air. Like I spent like 2-3 minutes and then I had to go back inside. So I spent time outside yesterday too.
What's today looking like?
Well, we still have light snow and blowing snow in most parts of the regions today. Then we'll see a mix of sun and clouds this afternoon, windy this morning. Then that should be easing to something more mild this afternoon. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at -14. Some parts still seeing light snow, a bit of drift in open areas. This should ease off in the afternoon period. Then we see a mix of sun and clouds. This morning it's going to start breezy. The winds will settle later and we'll get to a high of -12. The wind chill this morning makes it feel like -30. So you just want to take care. It's definitely a cold front. You don't want to get stuck in the Interlake region. We are seeing snowfall warning in that area, just affecting Lake Winnipeg and surrounding area. That should stay with you for most of the day, but we're still monitoring that and we'll keep you updated as it happens. For today, a mix of sun and clouds in the forecast and a high of -12.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk, did you run in this morning?
I did. It was actually a little bit, there's that little fresh bit of snow. It was a bit more of a trudge than usual, actually. Yep. But as I pulled up to the CBC building, the sidewalk plowers were already out and about doing their thing. So.
Do you know what I love about them at this time of the morning? So there's no one out there, to be clear, right? Often it's very sparse. bars, it's early, right? But when they have clear and it's safe to do so, some of them are so fast.
Oh, they were giving her.
It's like watching them like now. It's like watching, when you do a video game or Pac-Man or something. I'm pulling an old video game out, but it's like nee, really quick.
All business.
Yeah.
It'd be fun to watch from a bird's eye view. It would totally look like that. For sure.
Yeah, that would be cool. We should drone them, the sidewalk cleaners.
That'd be fun. Yeah. Well, so other than that, though, so hopefully many of the sidewalks, at least here in kind of the West Broadway, West End, might be clear by the time you're on your way, if you're on foot this morning. Haven't heard of any major issues here in the city in terms of traffic. But out on the highways, looking at Manitoba 511, looks like in Western Manitoba today, poor visibility might be an issue for folks. And as you get further north into the Swan River area, still some covered highways. So just be careful if you're Roblin as well. So not ideal out there, but if you have any updates for me, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, we're starting the show today with something to get you smiling. Neurohilarity's back. Jay Williams and Snarky Remarkable are part of this year. It's a musical comedy show this time featuring two neurodivergent musicians who I just mentioned who thrive on wit and laughter. Now, Adam Schwartz is the founder of Neurohilarity and the producer of this show. He himself lives with Asperger's syndrome and has been doing great work in our community with these shows. He's up early to tell us about this one. Good morning, Adam.
Hi, Marcy. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being with us. So how is this show different from other Neurohilarity shows that you guys have done in the past?
Great question. So our usual shows are stand-up comedy or a variety show. This is their first musical comedy show.
Why did you want to do it?
Because we've recently put on an arts series exploring different arts forms. Like we just recently put on a visual arts show, Angela Taylor, and before that we put on an Indigenous neurodivergent comedy show featuring Cheyenne Sapp.
So you thought maybe to try something different this year. What was it like trying to figure out who was going to be in it?
It was easy because I just picked the funniest musical comedians I knew, and they were fortunate to agree to do the show.
We're going to play a little bit of Snarky Remarkable and a tune called Meltdown in a moment. How would you describe Snarky Remarkable and Jay Williams for people that have never seen them?
So Jay Williams is more as sillier, while Snarky's songs are slightly cheekier, is how I would describe the difference between their two sounds.
What do you hope people walk away from the show's feeling like?
I would love them to walk away feeling entertained because, first off, the shows are created to show that neurodivergent people are just as talented and funny as everyone else.
You and I talked years ago when you were first dipping your toe into this for yourself. What's your reaction to how much this has grown? And been doing this year in and year out now for a while.
I'm loving it. I'm loving getting to work with all these different neurodivergent artists and help them share their art in their way.
You also, when you were first getting up on stage yourself, Adam, I know, there were the nerves there. And then once you got over it, as you said, you kind of almost got addicted to doing it. Like it was so awesome. How much are you helping other young neurodivergent artists to find, their voice and their confidence?
As much as we can. We've just been offering some classes for emerging neurodivergent artists, which has been amazing. And such as their Neurospicy burlesque class offered by Mr. Strange and Felicity Fawn, as well as a visual arts class offered by Angela Taylor.
How important do you think that this is, just something to laugh at in these uncertain times?
There's no power, no tool or method greater than laughter, except for penicillin.
What should people expect if they are going to this show? Is it obviously it's musical, as you said, but is it it's not a musical? It's just that their actual work is singing songs, right?
Right. They're both talented musicians as well as comedians and songwriters. So, but there's no dancing.
Got it. We're about to play one of those tunes, so we're leaving some time for that. So thanks for being up early and telling us about this. I know it's happening at February 12th, Handsome Daughters, 7:30, tickets at the door. Is that all right?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right, nice to talk to you, Adam. Take care.
Hey, bye.
It's Adam Schwartz. He's the founder of Neurohilarity. So you can catch Neurohilarity presenting J. William as and Snarky Remarkable, as I said. February 12th, Handsome Daughters, 7:30. Here's Snarky with Meltdown.
Of course there's meaning if you put it there. If you look hard enough, you'll find an answer. It's something you can't believe in. It's right there. It's so obvious. Why does nobody see it? I'm cutting to the core of the center of the earth. If gold is just a rock, then what's it really worth? And the clouds, they block the sun. This never bothered anyone. But when the light strikes your face, we turn our eyes away. I can't help feeling we're live and on the air. My greatest concern becomes, how am I performing? I feel so appealing when you're in your underwear. I try to imagine it's easy. If you're gonna lose your mind every time it's changed now, you're gonna have a meltdown. Remember when you shine so bright, when you kept your chakras all aligned, coordinated heart and mind. But that was back in another life. You had fun until the morning, and then decided that you never had a good time. You just woke up, you were so blind. If you're gonna run inside every time it rains out, always having to unwind, rewind you up in chains now. If you're gonna lose your mind every time it's changed now, you're gonna have a meltdown. You're gonna have a meltdown. You're gonna have a meltdown. Held these beliefs when you were young. Suddenly everything you know is wrong. If you keep changing all your songs, how could anyone sing along? You got too much of a good thing, and it gets boring and you gotta blow it up. Bridges burn, ain't no thing. You're great, everybody sucks. And the clouds, they block the sun. You're gonna have a meltdown. It's never bothered anyone. But when the light strikes your face, we turn our eyes away. Of course there's meaning if you put it there. If you look hard enough, you'll find an answer. But if you're gonna run inside every time it rains out, always having to unwind will wind you up in chains now. If you're gonna lose your mind every time it's changed now, have a meltdown.
I kind of needed that tune this morning. I don't know. Winter, being inside, right? A lot of people having meltdowns for so many reasons right now. Loved that. That was a performer, Snarky Remarkable, who's going to be at the Handsome Daughters, 7:30 p.m. on February 12th as part of the Neurohilarity musical show. Tickets are $15 at the door. I love that line. If you're going to lose your mind every time there's change now, you're going to have a meltdown. Ain't that the truth? 6:25 a.m. the time right now on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at the show. Today's high minus 12 with a light snow and blowing snow. So pretty much the same as yesterday's forecast, but the winds will be a little stronger in Winnipeg today. We do have challenges with the weather in other parts of Manitoba. So we had, obviously, through Riding Mountain and to the west, bigger dumps of snow overnight and yesterday. This morning, there's a snowfall warning for Barons River, Little Grand Rapids, Bloodvein, as well as through that region. 10 to 20 centimeters expected through those interlake regions through today still. There's school cancellations. Heather just brought those into me. So Mountain View School Division, pardon me, I should be correct here, bus cancellations as well. So Mountain View School Division is bus cancellation. All of the school division buses are canceled in Mountain View right now. That is because they say due to the ongoing storm. Brandon School Division will have buses not operating outside the city of Brandon today. And Alexander, O'Kelly, and Spring Valley schools are closed because of the weather. Well, let's turn our attention to sports. Today is a big day for Canadian Olympians. It is exactly a year now from the opening ceremony of the 2026 Milan Cortina Winter Olympics. These games mark the first time ever that an Olympics will be officially shared between two host cities. Milan Cortina are set out to be the most gender-balanced Winter Games to date as well. And to talk about what to expect and how Team Canada is looking a year out, Anastasia Busis is with us. She's a host, of course, with CBC Sports. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Great. I got to say, I listened to that song before this interview, and I had to Shazam it. I love that song.
Right? Oh, the artist will be very pleased. Very pleased.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great to be talking to you.
Well, great to have you on. Hopefully no athletes are having meltdowns. Hopefully they're all preparing. How's Team Canada looking a year out?
You know what? They're looking great. It's so I was a long track speed skater. I got to compete in 2 Olympic Games, and 1 year out, honestly, can be a little bit anxiety inducing because you think, oh my, do I have enough time? You know, it's only a year away, but they certainly do. They have just had such a phenomenal winter season, kind of in our traditional, you know, when you think of long track and short track, speed skating doing very, very well. But we've also seen a real resurgence and kind of a renaissance on some of the snow sports too. Alpine's doing really well. And hey, the NHL players are back. Marie-Philippe Poulin is going to be leading Team Canada to another gold medal perhaps. So yeah, the red and white are doing very well with 365 to go.
I love watching her. So these Olympics are being called the most spread out games ever, Anastasia. Why is that?
Yeah, so they're being hosted by 2 cities, Milano and Cortina, 22,000 kilometers squared. I'm not very good at math, but I know that's a big, big geographical spread. It's going to be the most geographically widespread games in history. And you know what? This is pretty smart. It's really to combat costs. They've tried to be really crafty with using pre-existing infrastructure, which is great. I think it's certainly a trend that we're going to see in the Olympic Games and bids going forward because it just makes sure that you know, the infrastructure that is being built is needed and it makes sense for the locals and the host nation, and it does curb costs. So they're being, they're thinking outside of the box, and they're in a great way right now. We're going to have a front row ticket to seeing the beauties of Italy.
The question is, will the weather be cooperating? This morning in national news, actually on World Report, they're talking once again about, you know, climate and the warming. January, they didn't expect this, but one of the warmest on record. So what kind of problems could that cause for the organizers of winter sporting events here?
And it's, you know what, it's a topic that's on everyone's brain. You know, I get to work in sport every single day, and this is a real problem in winter sport. We're seeing, you know, alpine events get canceled. We're seeing snow not stick on the ground, of course. And there's some pretty alarming stats that, you know, in a few decades, essentially half of the winter Olympic host cities that we can kind of think and name actually might not have a climate that could host a winter game. So Italy is no different. 90% of Italy's ski slopes rely on artificial snow. The good thing about that is that they do have the infrastructure. They're well, they're well poised to pull it off regardless of the weather. But Canadian athletes are kind of projecting perhaps some slushy conditions.
Winnipeg, it's our chance, everyone.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I'm sorry that it's so cold there today.
Tell us a little bit about at this point who the Canadians are that are likely to grab most of the attention in 2026. You already mentioned one, but who else are you watching?
Yeah, so it's kind of that, I call it championship season. The World Championships for so many sports are being contested right now and kind of through March. The World Alpine Championships are going on right now, actually. You can watch on cbcsports.ca. But the World Championships dictate so much of kind of quota spots for countries. So we don't have a huge list of athletes that have pre-qualified at this very moment. I can tell you, women's hockey is in. Marie-Philip Poulin, the GOAT, of course. I mean, she's going to continue to do poo things. She is the greatest hockey player of all time in the women's game. And then again, the NHL players are back. This is the first time since Sochi 2014, so that's going to cause, a lot of excitement. Folks are already talking Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid. I mean, they might have an all-star lineup, but I'll just give love to one of truly a greatest, GOAT, certainly an ultimate champion of his sport, Mikhail Kingsbury. He's well within reaching his 100th World Cup victory this year, and he's certainly a heavy favorite for winning 2 Olympic golds in a year's time as well.
Thanks for teeing it all up for us. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Have fun. Cheers.
Cheers. That's Anastasia Bushis, host of CBC Sports and a former Canadian Olympic speed skater. We are now a year out from the Games. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is minus 14 in Winnipeg. Snow and blowing snow is going to end this afternoon. That strong wind will back off this afternoon as well, leaving us with a mix of sun and clouds and a high today of minus 12. A person is in hospital this morning after being assaulted in Osborne Village. CBC reporter Megan Ketchison is in the village right now and joins us live. Megan?
Well, here's what I can tell you is the call came in about 5 o'clock this morning in the 100 block of Osborne. And what we have right now are 2 police vehicles that are blocking the right-hand curb lane on Osborne, northbound between Stradbrook and River. Now, they are expected to be investigating here on the site all day. One person was taken to hospital. We don't know the condition that they're in, but police do say that they are expected to be here for most of the morning. Traffic-wise, this is a busy segment, and you will lose the right-hand lane on Osborne northbound between Stradbrook and River. Reporting live, Megan Ketchison, CBC News.
Thanks so much, Megan. One of Steinbach's biggest employers knows the window hasn't closed on punitive U.S. tariffs. The looming deadline still weighs heavily on staff and management at Lowen Windows. President and CEO Neil Fast says tariffs would instantly make his products more expensive in the U.S.
We have incredibly skilled employees, and frankly, we would not want to lose a single one of them to layoffs if we have any other choice.
Fast says workers have voiced fears about layoffs during the company's town halls. He says that could happen if tariffs returns, but the company, he says, will do everything in its power to protect the jobs of its roughly 700 skilled workers. A lumber owner in southern Manitoba is feeling uncertainty around those possible U.S. tariffs and says his customers do as well. Joel Hartung owns the Zone Lumber Yards in 3 different Manitoba centers. He's been fielding calls from customers with questions related to tariffs, asking to secure orders for later this year. Hartung admits having more materials on hand longer will put stress on his company's cash flow and inventory management.
Lots of people are wanting to lock in pricing, so they want to lock in pricing for the project later, but they don't necessarily want to pay for it or are able to take delivery.
Hartung says the supply and demand issues stemming from the pandemic are part of the reason his customers are taking a proactive approach now, trying to secure materials. A freeze on U.S. aid research funding could kill a University of Manitoba outreach program that saves lives in Nairobi. For more than 40 years, scientists in Winnipeg have partnered with sex workers and other vulnerable people in Kenya who have HIV. Professor Julie Lajoie says 50,000 people get AIDS prevention drugs through this program. Lajoie says their lives are at risk, and she's putting out an urgent plea for help.
With private funding, continue for at least a few days to make sure that participants can have drug for another month. Everybody that needs their HIV treatment can have it for another month during the time that we try to run a miracle.
Lajoie says the program's been getting $1.5 million a year, and she says if it stops, people will die and HIV will spread in Kenya. A hearing on an affordable housing project next to the Granite Curling Club is set for this morning at Winnipeg City Hall. The club's board sent a letter this week calling on the city to delay that hearing. They say they don't oppose the housing project, but worry the loss of part of their parking lot will hurt membership. Jeremy Reed is the head of the University of Winnipeg Community Renewal Corporation, which is leading this project. He says they want to work out a deal that provides support to preserve the designated heritage building.
Instead of a land lease payment, we would be making an annual payment in lieu of a land lease payment that would go into a heritage preservation fund for the granite curling facility.
Reed says the development would include 15 parking spots for curling club members. The Israeli defense minister has ordered his army to prepare a plan to allow people in Gaza to leave the Strip. The instruction follows President Donald Trump's announcement the U.S. plans to take over Gaza and resettle the Palestinians who are living there. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu endorsed the idea last night on Fox News.
The actual idea of allowing first Gazans who want to leave. I mean, what's wrong with that? They can leave. They can then come back. They can relocate and come back.
But Palestinian leaders reject the plan. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. And the heist of 100,000 eggs from the back of a trailer in Pennsylvania has become a whodunit case police have yet to crack. Pennsylvania State Police say they have no leads 4 days after the theft. Law enforcement officials say the crime could be tied to the sky-high cost of eggs in the U.S., where bird flu has caused the cull of millions of chickens. These missing eggs are worth about $40,000 U.S. That is one big omelet. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I was watching something on this, on the prices in the States specifically, and I think the number they were saying is $3 a dozen is what it used to be, and now it's up to $9.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's just wild. But
and
yes,
it's impacting everyone from restaurants to bakers, all kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah, they were showing on one of the U.S. networks different, delis and breakfast spots, and there was like a limit on how many eggs they'd give you, and there was a 50-cent surcharge on each egg.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's really expensive. And then they had this one woman on, and the interviewer said, well, how many eggs do you eat in a day? And she said 3 every day. And the interviewer was like, that seems like a lot. I can see your face, Heather. It seems like a lot to me, too. You, too?
Yeah, for sure.
I know. So now I feel like asking listeners, if you're up and cracking yours, how many eggs do you eat in a day? I'm just curious.
And
now.
what would you be willing to pay for them?
Well, right. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Corey, Abby, how many eggs? Are you big? Are you 8 eggs?
Yes, I boil mine.
Do you have one every day?
Like maybe 4.
In a day?
A day.
Do you really? Okay,
Yeah.
see, there you go, Corey.
Yeah, about 2 and scrambled eggs, because a toddler, it's like the only way he gets his protein is scrambled eggs. He won't eat anything but scrambled eggs some days.
Look at that. I can hear everybody talking to themselves out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is
okay.
4 too much? I'm thinking it now. 4, is it too much?
You're not going to get any egg judgment from me, man. It's usually affordable, good, healthy protein, but maybe not as affordable as it has been. All right, let's get into what's happening. Actually, before you give the forecast, Abby, why don't I read these cancellations?
Go ahead.
Just a couple. These are buses canceled because of weather. So Mountain View School Division has canceled all of their buses today because of what they call the ongoing storm in that area. Brandon School Division buses aren't operating in the rural parts of the division, and Alexander, O'Kelly, and Spring Valley schools are closed. So that's the whole list. It's short right now, and it's all because of what's still developing there. Abby, with regional forecast? How's your regional forecast now?
Yeah, we're looking at snow and blowing snow in most of the regions today, especially down south. So that should clear up as you head into the day. For Winnipeg and surrounding areas, we're looking at temperatures around minus 14 now. At the Forks, we're seeing some light snow and some drifts in open areas. So if you're outside the city or in on the perimeter, you should be noticing those drifts. That should clear this afternoon. We warm up to a high of minus 12 later, and then we see some partly cloudy conditions with the temperatures around minus 17 overnight. For the Red River and Pembina Valley region, we're seeing temperatures around minus 17 at this time. Also light snow. We're seeing drifts also in that part of the region. As you head into the day, you'd see these conditions turn to some sunny and cloudy conditions later in the day. Highs around minus 13. The wind chill though makes it feel like minus 31 this morning. Now we head west. It is minus 18 in Brandon with some light snow and drifts also in that area. That should ease this afternoon. We get to a high of minus 13 for folks in the Westman region. The wind chill makes it feel like minus 33 this morning. Heading into the Parkland region, Dauphin sitting at minus 17 at this time. Light snow also blowing in that part of the province. Expect a mix of sun and clouds today. Highs around minus 13. In the Interlake region, temperatures around minus 15. Gimli surrounding areas, you're noticing that you're seeing that snow blowing around this morning. That should ease to a mix of sun and clouds later. Highs around minus 13. Also, the wind chill feels like minus 30 this morning, and we do have that snowfall warning impacting the little portion of that region, focusing around the Lake Winnipeg area. In the powerfully influent temperatures hovering near 17.8, minus 17, minus 18 at this time. The snow should ease later in the day. We'll see highs around minus 12. Up north, Thompson minus 17 with light snow, cloudy all day, high 11. Similar conditions in Churchill, minus 13 at this time. The snow will be clearing later, and then we'll see a high of minus 24. In Summary, Mercy, minus 14 in Winnipeg. It's going to be like a kind of mild day, although the seasonal high for this time of the year is minus 10. But a high for today is minus 12. So it's going to be like a windy, light snow blowing, and just take care out there.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Time for the morning commute update with Corey.
You got a call from Jim, who's driving from Matlock down to St. Andrews, just north of Winnipeg there. He says the highways there are kind of all sort of covered in snow. You can still drive, but you got to go slower. He says, especially when a car or a semi kind of comes by you, it kicks up snow and it makes visibility pretty tough. So just be careful there if you're on the highways, particularly in the Interlake area this morning. If you see anything else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Time for business news with Crystalie Ramlakan. Hi, Crystalie.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So I'm actually, you know what I was doing? If people are watching on YouTube, they can see I'm typing while we're doing weather and traffic. I'm updating our next interview. It's a conversation I had yesterday, and it was all about interprovincial trade. But you actually have some news this morning about what the federal transport minister and trade minister has said on this, right?
Yes, so Federal Minister of Transport and Internal Trade Anita Anand says the regulations that are often criticized as barriers to trade between provinces and territories could all crumble within a month. And remember, there has been a month-long pause on tariffs from the U.S. So she says there was an emergency meeting last week between Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the premiers, and the threat of tariffs from the U.S. has brought a new sense of urgency. So Anand has said removing existing barriers could lower prices by up to 15%, boost productivity, and add up to $200 billion to the economy. So now there has been, of course, work to remove red tape for decades, but rules, regulations, and standards that inhibit the free movement of goods and services still remain. So for more on this, here's Carlo Dade, who is a trade expert with the Canada West Foundation.
If we are ever going to diversify from the U.S. market and take advantage of the market within Canada, we got to know our own country first, and we got to help businesses. It just won't magically happen, which is the current discourse around free trade. Cut the barriers and there'll be growth in Canada. You got to do the work.
So the federal government is hosting a Canada-U.S. economic summit tomorrow in Toronto, aimed at increasing investment and easing internal trade barriers.
Let's go to another story. Some businesses are actually already shedding jobs, I understand, in the wake of the tariff threats from the States.
Yeah, that's right. So Canadian pantyhose maker Sheertex is temporarily laying off 40% of its staff. The company's CEO says this is in part because of possible tariffs on Canadian goods. And Sheertex does 85% of its sales in the U.S. So the Montreal-based manufacturer employed about 350 staff before this cut. And also, though, this company is facing tremendous financial uncertainty because of delays in closing the final portion of its most recent fundraising. So the business says it would also be affected by the removal of an exemption, which made direct-to-consumer orders under $800 duty-free. So the company says it could face a 16% duty on top of this, of a possible 25% tariff. And also, a Quebec furniture company says the threat of tariffs has forced it to lay off 115 people. South Shore Furniture is laying off 97 people at its headquarters and factory, and another 18 people at its operations in the eastern townships. And the company says uncertainty around President Donald Trump's motives has significantly affected sales. 70% of its products are shipped to the U.S., and South Shore says major American retailers are increasing their imports from Asia instead of Canada.
In the next hour of the program, I just want to mention that you were saying one of those businesses that did 85% of the business with the States, Lowen Windows and Doors, that manufactures in Steinbach, around 85% of their business goes to the States as well. So we're going to hear from them with that perspective. A lot of businesses nervous right now. And let's talk Winter Olympic Games. We just had a tee-up because they're 1 year away of how the athletes are going to do. But I understand when you look at this through a business lens, there's anxiety for some athletes about whether or not they're even going to be able to afford to train.
Yeah, so it has been a rough couple of years for all national sports organizations. Costs, of course, have increased across the board for everything, and funding for these kinds of organizations has dried up. So the Canadian Olympic and Paralympic committees have lobbied for increases to funding, but say sports organizations are skipping competitions athletes would normally attend, scaling back programming, and increasing athlete fees. 34-year-old Olympic gold and silver medalist Ivany Blondin is a long track speed skater on the Canadian national team, and she trains 5 to 7 hours a day, 6 days a week. So it is a full-time job for her.
It's hard when the funding for the athletes has kind of stayed stagnant for the past 20 years. Like, we've had small increases. We just had another small one, which thankfully we did, but it still doesn't match where our economy's gone, and the cost of living and groceries and just everything in general. So, and even our national sports organizations are running mostly deficits at this point.
So before, national athletes were not required to pay for things like training camps and flights, but that is no longer the case for a lot of them.
How are the markets looking this morning, Crystalie?
In Europe, stocks are rising. Germany, the UK, and France are all up. In Asia, markets are mostly higher. Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all up. Oil is up 67 cents to $71.70 US per barrel. Gold is down $7.05 to $2,860.19 US per ounce. And the dollar is down almost a quarter of a cent to 69.6 cents US.
All right, Crystalie Ramlakan, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
Let's stay talking about business news. As Crystalie just mentioned, the Federal Minister of Transport does say regulations that are criticized as barriers to interprovincial trade could all crumble within a month in the face of what's happening with the U.S. tariff threat. Now, in a moment, we will hear a conversation I had yesterday post-show about the barriers that exist right now between provinces. But to set it up, here's how a local business owner described to CBC the impact of the regulations. This is Brock Coots, one of the owners of Patent 5 Distillery in Winnipeg.
Into the U.S. and more profitable than it is to try to sell to our neighbors in Ontario or Quebec. Most provinces don't afford craft distillers from out of province the same privileges that they do for their local distillers. So to compete in another province is also difficult.
So could the easing of some of these barriers actually improve things for businesses? What could they mean for the Canadian economy? Joining us to talk about interprovincial trade is Ryan Minucha. He's a research fellow at the C.D. Howe Institute. He's also author of Booze, Cigarettes and Constitutional Dust-Ups, Canada's Quest for Interprovincial Trade. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. So what are the economic possibilities for Canada if these international trade barriers could be eased or lifted?
Great question. On the outer bound, like maximal policy intervention, we're talking about $200 billion a year with a lift of about 7.9% of the Canadian GDP, which is really big. And if we want to drill down more specifically on something concrete, like make it real, Ryan, we're talking about interprovincial trade barriers in trucking. And I know that the Committee on Internal Trade is rapidly working towards an agreement that will unlock up to $1.6 billion to the Canadian GDP just on the basis of trade barriers on trucking alone. So these are big numbers.
And I just want to correct myself. I misspoke there, obviously. Instead of saying internal trade, I said international trade, which is exactly the opposite. We're looking at interprovincial. Can you tell us more about past efforts to allow people and goods to travel more freely across Canada?
Great question. And I first want to say I applaud Premier Canoe and then Manitoba's Internal Trade Minister, Jamie Moses, just for their leadership. It follows a long line of legacy in Manitoba. Manitoba being a very, very strong leader on internal free trade front. And as you said, we 30 years ago, we decided to use an internal trade agreement to liberalize trade amongst the provinces and territories. And the seat of that organization, the Canadian Free Trade Agreement's Internal Trade Secretariat, actually lives in Winnipeg. It's in Winnipeg. So Winnipeg playing an especially prominent role in the discussion on internal trade barriers. Past reconciliation agreements we saw with construction codes, which are said to be fully implemented by 2028. We're talking about $1 billion a year in savings from just the work of reconciling across code books when it comes to construction across the country.
Why is the issue difficult to solve? Like most Canadians might think, why don't we just trade? Like make it simple, trade across the provinces, everything within Canada, let's all help each other. There's a lot of regulations that get in the way, but in your view, why is it difficult to move forward?
The same thing that makes the Canadian project possible is the same thing that creates the trade barriers. So our Constitution gives a great deal of power to our provinces and territories. And that's so important because the second largest country by landmass, you need that local control. But at the same time, those regulatory powers are used to control and to create provincial fiefdoms. And so I think the question confronting Canadians right now is really, are we a country of 13, we'll call it fiefdoms or kingdoms, or are we one economic union? And where can we, yes, just because we have provincial regulatory authority, where can we make sure we're aligned with our neighbors?
Can you help us understand why it's easier, just to look at this from a different perspective, why it's easier to trade with the United States?
Great question. I mean, let's dive into, I realize, let's talk a little bit more specifically about what I mean by trade barriers. So I talked about trucking and the unlock being about $1.6 billion a year, right? But what underlies that? We're talking about varying driver qualifications for long combination vehicles, non-uniform permitting processes for over-dimensional loads, the non-mutual recognition of farm vehicles. It's that stuff that is creating these clashes, creating the inefficiencies. And zooming out from trucking, we can look at high visibility safety apparel not having a standard definition across the country. Talking about, we did construction codes, now it's electrical codes. And talking about workplace occupational health safety exposure limits aligning across the country. These are the things that just make it easier for our businesses to engage in business across either side of a provincial or territorial border.
Thanks for your time this morning, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I spoke with Ryan Minucha yesterday. We will see if those trade barriers fall on news now that they're looking at that at the federal level. Ryan's a research fellow with the C.D. Howe Institute. He's also author of Booze, Cigarettes and Constitutional Dust-Ups, Canada's Quest for Interprovincial Trade. Coming up at the top of the clock, I'll give you a long list of school cancellations that just came in. Heather was handed them to me, and buses canceled because of some of the weather. So you check your division before heading out this morning. Next on the show, though, let's continue talking about Donald Trump and some of the things he's been announcing down south that could impact us in Canada and around the world. Donald Trump laying out his vision for Gaza during a visit with the Israeli Prime Minister, a plan that's widely condemned by leaders all around the world. Now, the key feature is forcible displacement of Palestinians to neighboring states. Michael Link's here to talk about it, Professor Emeritus of Law at Western University and former UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. Thank you for having me.
I really want to look at the law here. What's the main violation of international law that's reflected in what Donald Trump has put forward here?
Sure. I'm going to give you three examples. First, the term of removing people from their home or territory is called forced displacement. That's a serious violation under the Geneva Conventions of 1949. Those are the laws of war and occupation, and both the United States and Israel, as well as every other country in the world, are signatories to the Geneva Conventions. Secondly, forced displacement is listed as a crime against humanity under the 1998 Rome Statute, which created the International Criminal Court. Now, the Criminal Court has ruled that the Rome Statute applies to the occupied Palestinian territory, including Gaza, and therefore, even though neither the United States nor Israel are actually signatories to the Rome Statute, because the crime would take place in Gaza, therefore both Israeli and American political leaders could be criminally liable for initiating the forced displacement of the Palestinians. And the third point I want to make is that back in June of 2024, the United Nations Security Council, which is the highest decision-making body in our international system, adopted a resolution calling for an immediate and durable ceasefire in Gaza. This resolution was initiated by the United States with, it said, the support of Israel. And one of the operative paragraphs of this UN Security Council resolution said that the Council rejects, and here I'm quoting, any attempt at demographic or territorial change in the Gaza Strip. So I think there's probably other features of international law that we could bring in, but those would be the three most important ones, all of which draw, I think, a pretty bright red line as to where the United States would be forbidden to head to with respect to these musings on the future of Gaza.
What do you do, though, when you have a leader that doesn't seem to care about red line systems, structures as they've been in place even for decades?
Well, let's keep in mind that even Donald Trump's best laid plans don't always come to fruition. In the last year of his first presidency, in January of 2020, he initiated a pretty lopsided peace proposal between Israel and the Palestinians called the Peace to Prosperity Plan. And he put a lot of political capital into it. But by June of that year, he had to withdraw that because there was such strong opposition to it, not only in the Arab and Muslim world and in the Middle East, but internationally as well. Even the Pope spoke out against it. So I'm not confident he's going to be able to go ahead with these plans for the removal of the Palestinians from Gaza and the American takeover of Gaza. I think this idea will probably die on the vine. My worry is that Donald Trump, because he surrounded himself with many policy hawks on Israel, will then wind up trying to find some consolation prizes to give to Benjamin Netanyahu, such as either increasing the number of settlers and settlements in the occupied East Jerusalem and West Bank, or even going ahead with a formal annexation of parts or all of the West Bank. So that's my worry as to where we may be heading over the next little while.
Just as a last question, if U.S. and Israel were to implement this plan, or even if he does what you're suggesting, some different version, what would Canada's obligation be under international law if that happens?
Sure. Canada is a signatory both to the 1949 Geneva Conventions and to the 1998 Rome Statute. It would have, just like any other country whose signature is on one or both of those treaties, to try to do individually and collectively all that it can to prevent serious violations of those treaties. And these would amount to serious violations. So that would mean we've probably got to stop our weapons sales to Israel and the United States. We would have to rethink some of our trade and investment and economic relations with the United States. And now I know Canada already has a full plate with respect to its relationships with the United States. But these are some of the obligations that Canada would have to wind up considering, and it should be better done if it's done jointly with other countries in the world who are equally alarmed as we are with respect to these musings.
Thank you very much for your analysis. Very valuable.
Thank you very much for having me, Marcy.
That is Michael Link, Professor Emeritus of Law at Western University, former UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory. Heather Wells now with a quick look at our headlines.
Good morning. Well, a person is in hospital after being assaulted with a weapon early this morning. Police were called to the 100 block of Osborne in the Village around 5 this morning. They say there were multiple witnesses and officers expect to be in the area for much of the day. It's going to impact traffic this morning down to one lane northbound Osborne, so that may cause some delays. We'll have more news for you coming up at 7:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
788-3093. If you have any other traffic issues, -14 light snow and drifting snow in Winnipeg will be around -12 today. In the next hour of the show, how is Low and Windows and Steinbach impacted by the threat of tariffs? Well, a lot. 85% of their business is done with the States. In addition, we're going to be talking about and hearing about something lovely. We're going to hear about a local fashion designer who's showcasing her colorful collection inspired by her Nigerian heritage. So stay tuned for that. Here are the school cancellations and closures. Prairie Spirit School Division, schools are closed, no buses. Fort LaBosse, no buses, schools are closed. Turtle Mountain School Division's closed and canceled buses. Lakeshore School Division's closed. Beautiful Plains School Division's canceled buses. School is on though. Rolling River has buses canceled, and Colony School's closed for today. Mountain View School Division buses are all canceled. Brandon School Division rural buses are canceled. Alexander O'Kelly and Spring Valley schools are closed. Finally, in the DFSM, the Franco-Manitoban Division, École de Source, École Notre-Dame de Lourdes, and École Gilbert Rosset are all closed. So I know I read that quickly and swiftly, but that's the list to this hour. Check before you go, and World Report. It's coming up next on CBC.
But Windsor retains her own identity as an expanding industrial center.
We are in Windsor, Ontario today, a city that sits right across the river from Detroit. Its identity is tied to that border and to making cars and other things that cross from one country to another. A special show live from Windsor coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Israel says it is making preparations for a large number of Palestinians to leave the Gaza Strip. But some Palestinians are torn over President Donald Trump's proposal for the U.S. to take over Gaza. Some are considering it the opportunity to relocate. Others are worried. If they go, they will not be allowed to return. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik has more.
Facing winter winds and piles of debris, the frustration of living in Gaza boils over for Mohammed Abu Taima, trying to keep his tent from blowing away. Even with a ceasefire, trying to rebuild is a nightmare, says Gada El Cord. She admits even she has thought of leaving.
If we don't have a decent life as soon as possible, I think most of the Gazan here will think to leave and live abroad in a better life.
That is the debate in Gaza and in Israel now, in the wake of U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal that the U.S. remove some 2 million Palestinians to rebuild and redevelop what he calls the Riviera of the Middle East. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has ordered the military to prepare a plan for what he calls the voluntary departure of Gazans. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also seems to have embraced the idea.
I mean, what's wrong with that? They can leave, they can then come back, they can relocate and come back.
But Israel has a history of not allowing Palestinians to return, and settler groups have already drawn up their own plans for occupying Gaza. That's why Arab countries like Jordan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia have flatly rejected the Trump plan. For Riyad Mansour, the Palestinian representative to the UN, it's emotional.
We love the land of our country, whether we have palaces on it or destroyed buildings. We are determined to rebuild it.
But even if the ceasefire lasts, that could take years. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Israel says it is withdrawing from the United Nations Human Rights Council. It is the international body created to protect and promote human rights. On Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order withdrawing the United States from the council. Today, Israel's foreign minister says his country will do the same in light of what he calls institutional bias against Israel. Canadian border security is in the spotlight, and the RCMP is putting on a show. It is releasing details about some recent incidents. The Mounties and the CBSA have their work on display. As Cameron McIntosh tells us, this PR push is targeting an audience south of the border, the Trump administration.
You can see in the map there that
RCMP Assistant Commissioner Lisa Moreland points to a video screen. You can see a thermal camera image of 6 hotspots moving through a wooded area.
A group of 6 individuals were heading towards the Manitoba border.
Shot from a plane, RCMP directed officers on the ground to intercept. An example of border technology RCMP are very keen to draw attention to.
The RCMP is committed to using every available technology and asset to secure the border.
She says RCMP in Alberta were also involved in 2 recent border apprehensions, one using fixed cameras. RCMP make a lot of border arrests, usually don't go this big. But with U.S. President Donald Trump fixated on securing the shared border, threatening tariffs, there's pressure. Christian Luprecht is an expert on border security.
The much more important audience is likely a U.S. audience, and in particular the White House.
For the RCMP, that's meant showing off a couple of newly leased Black Hawk helicopters. Well, earlier this week,
we share the longest border in the world.
Federal Public Safety Minister David McGuinty allowed cameras in as he spoke to RCMP and border agents at the Emerson border crossing in Manitoba about shifting priorities.
The president will continue on his path. We are executing on a plan here.
A plan not just to strengthen the border, but to be seen to be doing it. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Recently deported Indian migrants say they were mistreated by U.S. immigration authorities. Harvinder Singh says he was handcuffed and shackled for the 40-hour journey back to India yesterday. Indian lawmakers are now demanding answers about the handling of migrants on that flight. As Salima Shivji reports, the issue is straining the relationship between the two countries.
Fury outside India's parliament as members of the opposition hold up signs in protest. Humans, not prisoners, one says. Another reads, India in handcuffs. We will not tolerate this insult. It comes after an American military plane landed in India's northern Punjab state yesterday, carrying 104 Indians who were living illegally in the U.S., forcibly deported as part of the Trump administration's new immigration crackdown. Several complained they were handcuffed and shackled during the entire 40-hour journey.
It's really unacceptable.
Shashi Tharoor is a lawmaker with the opposition Congress Party.
If they are proven to be Indian nationals, we have a legal obligation to admit them, to accept them in our country. But the manner in which it was done, in handcuffs, squeezed into a military aircraft, in such an abrupt manner, that is not acceptable.
India's Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar stood up in Parliament to respond, saying women and children on the flight were not restrained in any way.
We are, of course, engaging the U.S. government to ensure that the returning deportees are not mistreated in any manner during the flight.
But he says the focus needs to be on cracking down on illegal migration, a key issue that threatens to derail the close India-U.S. ties that are so important to an Indian government wary of Chinese aggression in the region. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
A federal judge in Seattle will hear arguments today about Donald Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship. The U.S. president claims children of non-citizens are not entitled to citizenship, even if they're born in the U.S. Critics say that violates the Constitution. The judge will hear from 4 states that are suing to stop the order: Arizona, Illinois, Oregon, and Washington. Today's proceedings come just a day after a Maryland judge, a federal judge there, issued a nationwide pause in a separate but similar case. Overall, 22 states are taking legal action to stop Trump's order. There's a lot at stake for Yukon and Alaska if the Canada-U.S. trade war resumes. Northern communities already face a high cost of living, and as Juanita Taylor tells us, It could get worse if these two neighbors can no longer afford to do business.
It's only a 2-hour drive.
Orion Hansen drives to Whitehorse from Skagway, Alaska every 2 months to pick up supplies for his construction business.
The windows made in Whitehorse are excellent quality. They really understand cold climates.
But if the tariffs go ahead, Hansen says he might have to find other suppliers and barge them in, causing delays and making doing business more costly.
If it's no longer economically feasible for me to go up to Whitehorse, I would be having to deal with suppliers in the Seattle area.
Luke Panton is with the Yukon Chamber of Commerce. He's worried about fewer tourists coming in from the U.S. and buying local products.
But there's a lot of trade that happens of indigenous and cultural products that go back and forth across the border. If there's a decrease in sales, of course, it's going to affect our local cultural artisans.
I oppose these tariffs because we are neighbors.
Alaska Senator Kathy Giesel says she is working on a resolution opposing the tariffs because they want what Canada has to offer.
We get a lot of timber, a lot of building supplies from Canada. This will only shoot up our already exceedingly high cost of housing. It's not only economic partnership, but it's security and defense as well.
And it's waters. The Yukon government is putting $45 million towards a new ore dock in Skagway, crucial for exporting products from the Yukon's mines. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Jamaica is celebrating Bob Marley's legacy. Today, it is marking what would be his 80th birthday. Marley introduced reggae music to much of the world. He was a voice for the oppressed and downtrodden, and today, his estate is rolling out a series of events, starting with a tribute concert that is being live streamed from Kingston, Jamaica. It's called the Uprising Tribute Concert. Oh, no. That is the latest from World Report. Listening to World Report is the easiest way to stay on top of the news. But we need help getting the word out. You can help today by hitting the follow button on your preferred podcast app. I'm Marcia Young.
Yes, more Bob on wintry days, please. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to CBC's Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. It is minus 14 in the city this morning. This hour on the show, we're going to take you over to Steinbach. We're going to be hearing from a business there, Low End Windows. They've been manufacturing there for years. We're going to hear more about how they're going to navigate these uncertain times given the threat of U.S. tariffs. Big part of their markets in the States, 85% of their goods are involved in U.S. trade, so stay tuned. In addition, let's talk about trade on this side of in this country, rather. We're going to talk more about what our history is in terms of interprovincial trade, in terms of also being threatened with tariffs by the United States. When's the last time this would have happened to this scale, and what did Canada do then? So we have that coming up for you in the first half hour. Plus, just because I want to mention something bright this morning, at 7:40, we're going to hear from a local fashion designer who's showcasing a colorful collection. It's inspired by her own Nigerian heritage. So I'm looking forward to that story from our community reporter. Right now, it is 7:11 Thursday morning, and we have developing news in Osborne Village. Heather Walls is here with an update in our headlines.
Good morning. Yes, police are in the village investigating after a person was assaulted with a weapon. Police were called there about 5 o'clock this morning. It's the 100 block of Osborne. Police say the victim is in hospital, although it's not known how badly he was hurt. And there were multiple witnesses, according to police, and officers expect to be in that area for most of the morning. It is going to impact the morning drive because northbound traffic on Osborne through the village loses a lane. So keep that in mind as you head out this morning. A freeze on U.S. aid research funding could kill a University of Manitoba outreach program that saves lives in Nairobi. For more than 40 years, scientists in Winnipeg have partnered with sex workers and other vulnerable people in Kenya who have HIV. The professor involved says 50,000 people get AIDS prevention drugs through that program. We'll hear from her coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Time now to go to our forecast with Abby Adiyemi.
Yeah, we're looking at light snow and blowing snow this morning across the regions. Then we'll see a mix of sun and clouds in the afternoon, along with some windy conditions. The winds should ease as you get into the afternoon period. In Winnipeg at this time, minus 15. We're already noticing that light snow and with some drifting conditions outside. So you need to take care of you on the highway. We will see these periods of light snow and blowing snow throughout the morning. Then once that tapers off, we'll see a mix of sun and clouds this afternoon. It will be windy though, but conditions will improve as you get into the day. We're aiming for a high of minus 12, though the wind chill feels like minus 30 this
All
morning.
right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
We have problems with school closures and buses not going. I shouldn't say problems. We just have announcements. So here they are right now, and this is because, as you might have recalled, that yesterday we had systems to the west in Manitoba that were more involved than what we're seeing here in the city of Winnipeg. So lots of snow and stormy conditions. So all schools are closed, and there's no buses running this morning in Prairie Spirit School Division, Fort LaBosse School Division as well, all closed. Turtle Mountain, all closed. Lakeshore is closed. Beautiful Plains School Division, school is on, but buses aren't running. Rolling River, buses are canceled, and Colony schools are closed, but all other schools in Rolling River are open. Mountain View School Division, all buses are canceled. Brandon School Division, no rural buses. In addition, Alexandria, O'Kelly, and Spring Valley schools are closed. And in the Franco-Manitoban School Division, DSFM, École La Source, École Notre-Dame de Lourdes, and École Gilbert Rousset are all closed today. Let's get now to the actual morning commute with Corey.
The biggest issue out there, we just heard from Heather, northbound Osborne in the right-hand lane, police cars are blocking that lane. That's between Stradbrook and River, so might be slow going through the village this morning. As for the highways, I describe the conditions as less than ideal, but not awful. In terms of just here around Winnipeg, for example, but as you get further west, it does get a little bit more treacherous. Jim called, it says, driving from Matlock to St. Andrews, those highways are covered in snow, so you have to slow down. Then if a semi or something goes past you, whips up that snow, and visibility becomes a big issue. So careful out there on the highways this morning. It's maybe you just want to go a little bit slower than you normally do. If you have any updates for me, though, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, Trump has paused tariffs on Canadian imports to the United States for 30 days. We continue to analyze what the possible outcomes of all this could be and also where we're at in these 30 days. But right now, we want you to look back and think back because the looming threat of a trade war with the States still lingers. And while the butting of heads between the two countries might feel like new territory, it's actually not unprecedented. So what can the past teach us about the current political climate? That's a question that a group of University of Manitoba history professors hope to answer. They're having a roundtable discussion later today. First, though, Len Kufert's here with us via Zoom, one of the professors that's going to be speaking at the event. Good morning to you.
Hi, Marcy. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Really curious about this event you're having. Why don't we get right into it? I mean, how common are tariff wars, trade wars between the States and Canada?
Well, wars might be a little bit extreme of a way to put it, but there certainly were these periods of escalation between the two nations, and the probably the most prominent examples were in the later 19th century, from about the late 1870s onward, and really through to the First World War. There were tariffs that both nations had up against each other. They almost got to a free trade deal in 1911, but that was killed. And then in the Great Depression era, so 1930, the Americans put up a wall, much like Trump is threatening to do here, or has threatened and is continuing to do so. And Canada had to respond or retaliate. And the results of that, or the outcomes, were not really good for either side. The since Confederation, I won't go back further than that, but really since Confederation, there's always been a kind of push and pull in terms of how closely or how strongly the nations track each other's tariffs and duties. And so when the one puts duties higher and tariffs higher, the other one will respond. And we're living now, or we have been living since the late 1980s, since the free trade agreement between Canada and the US, and then Mexico as of the early 90s. We're living in a kind of era of relative calm or relative kind of backing away from those extreme measures. So many of your listeners probably will think, or be reacting as they should probably to this prospect of tariff war with, quite a bit of trepidation and what is going to happen. And while historians can't really predict what's going to happen, we can certainly say that the 1930s result or the 1930s efforts to have a trade war, a tariff war, didn't really work out for both sides.
Who starts it usually?
Who starts it of the two?
Yeah.
Well, in the case in 1930, it was the Americans, and that was the Hoover administration, who decided, okay, well, things are going badly. Stock market has crashed in late 1929. Hoover was in office and said, let's try this. It's in a way, I wouldn't hesitate. I would hesitate to say rather time honored, because the history of these kinds of things is really based on a simplistic understanding of how nations trade, and so it's really a kind of blunt instrument. But in the case of in 1930, the Canadians were the responding party,
same as now,
and didn't work out so well.
Is part of your discussion today, Professor Kufer, going to also be about the 2025 context of this, which is of course global trade? The difference from looking at history and today. I mean, global trade is so intrinsically, the markets are so intertwined all around the world now, and obviously with the internet and the way we're connected, that taking those apart, seems sort of unfathomable to people. So that's a massive critical difference now.
Yeah, and so many of the goods and the wealth that is transferred is done sort of electronically now. We are maybe stuck in a metaphor of things moving physically across borders quite often. But yeah, I think you used the right term there, sort of integration and intertwining of economies, and that's the operative thing. That's the thing that has really changed since, especially the 1990s and the advent of the World Trade Organization, for example, which is a kind of set of relationships in a way between nations that there are rules involved in trade, but they are not generally kind of punitive in the way that tariffs are, or an attempt to shut out goods from another place in the same way.
What do you, we highlighted the differences there, obviously, but what lesson do you think is most important to take away from the history books right now?
Oh, gosh. That nations are better off maybe specializing in what they can sort of do better. So, for example, it's really hard for nations to make everything to suit their own needs. And I think it's a bit of a fantasy for a nation like the United States to think that they can just, again, put up these tariff walls and their economy will all of a sudden spark to life where they found it wanting previously. Canada, for example, is not a nation that is, has a lot of citrus growers, for example. So we import that stuff from the United States, and that kind of recognition that some nations do some things better is important, and likewise, the Americans need to understand that perhaps softwood lumber, which has been a perennial thing that they contend with and has been fought over for decades, is something that Canada tends to be able to produce more cheaply and to allow that that commodity to move more freely. So putting up these kinds of restrictions is always a kind of wishful thinking exercise, and that doesn't often work out very well, and tends to be inflationary. I think Trump particularly won his election in November on the back of fears of inflation or scapegoating the previous administration for the inflation that was still kicking around, and these kinds of moves are going to be inflationary.
When you look in history, we've seen that as well, right? Like when you're talking about, previous to the Great Depression, the trade war between Canada and the States that you were highlighting there, some economic historians say that trade war, is this correct? Tariff war deepened the impacts of the Great Depression?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Because it did nothing to employ more people. It drove down consumption in general, because if people are laid off, they can't afford to have more stuff, like buy more stuff. They're going to just focus on the necessities, and any costs that are increased by tariffs are going to be borne by the consumer. And that's the real misconception I think people have about tariffs. They don't understand that it just largely passed on from the importer of those goods to the consumer, because the importers aren't going to be able to turn any sort of profit if they just eat that cost of the tariff. Well, and that's, go ahead.
No, I was just actually going to wrap us up and say, if people have more questions or want to understand this more, this is open this afternoon, this discussion that you're having. It's not. I apologize. I was told it was open to all.
Yes, yeah. No, absolutely open to everybody. Okay. But it is tomorrow afternoon.
Oh, pardon me. Okay, excellent.
It's the 6th. Yeah.
I'm glad I said that. I have that incorrect on my script. So isn't it good that we that we had this exchange on the air, Professor Cuford?
And we have 3 brilliant colleagues of mine that will be there, and I'll be there too, to also to weigh in on the Canadian side. So we've got I think a good mix of people, not just Canadianists, not just Americanists, that are going to be talking about it. So public welcome, obviously. Yeah, no problem.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being with us via Zoom to set up tomorrow's event for us, and enjoy your discussion when you get to it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You as well. That is Professor Len Cuford, history professor at the University of Manitoba. And so tomorrow, alongside 3 other professors, he's going to be talking all things tariffs at the University of Manitoba. The event is open to all. It goes from 1 to 2:30 tomorrow. It's at St. John's College.
Be an Iron Man and curl. No, not your hair. This is curling on the frozen ice of the Assiniboine River. Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is back February 7th to 9th. Form a team, embrace the winter with one hand, a rock with the other, and join the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
7:25 a.m., -16 in Winnipeg, Windsor West at 36, and list of school cancellations and bus cancellations. We'll read that right after your 7:30 news, but check your division, especially if you're in the western part of the province. Because of the storm yesterday and the snow coming down, you may in fact have some buses that aren't going and some schools closed. Also, we got a caller to the commuter line saying the city, Winnipeg, is like a skating rink. That's one caller who said what an intersection, I guess, slid right through. So take it easy if you're driving anywhere, 788-3093. Well, let's get to morning sports. Scott Regehr joins us now via Zoom. Hey, Scott.
Hey there, Marcy.
So a surprise announcement of the CFL.
Yeah, yesterday the League and the Players Association jointly announced that the salary cap's going to increase by close to $500,000. This is due in part to a new revenue-sharing model agreed to in the last round of negotiations between the two sides. It was an announcement that had many general managers and players, though, left them with raised eyebrows. Not only is this the largest bump in the salary cap in over a decade, but also it's the timing of this announcement. Currently, the CFL's free agent negotiating window is going on. This is where pending free agents are allowed to negotiate with teams. For a team like the Bombers, who are right up against the spending limit, this influx of cash, could have meant retaining someone like receiver Kenny Lawler. Reports are that Lawler will be heading east now to join the Ticats. Bombers head coach Mike O'Shea says the timing of the announcement is all a matter of perspective.
Depending on where you're standing, the timing is good or bad. The Players Association standpoint, it's probably good timing. From general manager standpoint, it might be challenging, but we don't know that yet. Free agency doesn't hit till actually February 11th, despite it always being talked about. So once again, I think depends on which side of the line you're standing on, what makes sense.
Mike O'Shea on to something there. None of the new deals that have been reported, by the way, can be made official until Tuesday of next week. Technically speaking, then, there's nothing stopping the Bombers' GM, Kyle Walters, from circling back to Kenny Lawler and matching the Ticats offer. Now, TSN's reporting that teams are operating under the belief that players will honor the terms of deals agreed to this week. However, one unnamed general manager said, quote unquote, "This is going to test the integrity of everyone."
Wow, what a story. Strange timing, to say the least. Let's go to what was a pretty dramatic night in baseball next.
In basketball, baseball too. The Jays aren't going to get Pete Alonso. It's a lot going on right now. It was trade deadline eve last night, Marcy, and the Raptors swung a deal of note, bringing in former All-Star Brandon Ingram. In return, Toronto is sending New Orleans players, including Canadian Kelly Olynyk, as well as a first-round draft pick. So pretty clear sign the Raptors rebuild. Well, it's over. Ingram, when he's back from injury at least, is going to join a core of Scotty Barnes, R.J. Barrett and company that should be able to compete for a playoff spot. For me, though, this is a head-scratching decision. By tanking, Toronto stood a reasonable chance to draft generational talent Cooper Flagg out of Duke University. But just like we saw the Raptors do a couple of years ago when Victor Wembanyama was a draft possibility, they're choosing to compete instead, and with a roster that looks very much like it's going to be entrenched in the murky middle of the league standings. Plenty of murk last night. Toronto fell by 31 points to Memphis.
Let's finish with what could be an emotional hockey game tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it likely will be when Team Canada and Team USA meet in Halifax as part of the rivalry series, Marcy. Given the political climate between the two countries at the moment, Canadian forward Blair Turnbull was asked whether she expects the Americans to be booed in her home province tonight.
I have not thought about that once, but I would expect maritime hospitality here tonight. I don't think politics should weigh into our hockey game. I think the fans should be excited to watch the highest level of women's hockey for the first time in a long time. So I'm hoping that everyone's here to support the game and to cheer us on.
That is New Glasgow, Nova Scotia native Blair Turnbull. Now, we've heard NHL fans boo opposing teams' national anthems this week in the wake of Donald Trump's tariff threats. Now we have the first direct country versus country competition, and between teams, Marcy, that have a very fierce rivalry at the most peaceable of times. So this could be fascinating tonight.
No doubt. Have you seen on social media, Premier Wab Kinew actually, there's this quip he made that a lot of people are sharing, and you might come across it today. And he says, don't boo the American anthem. Let's get back to, being Canadian and just boo them when they touch the puck. So people are reacting to that, and he kind of had a smile on his face when he was talking about that. I think just the people usually boo when the other team has the puck, right? But
yeah.
Complicated
we'll listen
issue.
Tonight and see. It is a very complicated issue for sure. We'll find out what happens later tonight.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
You bet.
Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's minus 15, a little bit of a blustery morning. Some light and blowing snow ending this afternoon. That wind, though, this morning, gusting at times to 60 and then backing off this afternoon. Today's high, minus 12. The continued threat of steep U.S. tariffs has workers at one of Steinbach's biggest employers worried about layoffs. The 700 employees at Lowen Windows know they are still not out of the woods. President and CEO Neil Fass says he would only consider cutting staff as a last resort.
We have incredibly skilled employees, and frankly, we would not want to lose a single one of them to layoffs if we have any other choice.
Fass says about 85% of Lowen's products go to the U.S. They are now trying to expand their sales in Canada and into other markets. You can hear more on this story coming up in the next half hour right here on Information Radio. A Manitoba business owner says he would like to see politicians take a risk so Canada doesn't find itself in tariff trouble with the U.S. in the future. Joel Hartung owns the Zone lumber yards across Manitoba, and he would like to see enhanced manufacturing production in the country so less has to be sent outside Canada.
I think this is it's a good time to look within and see how we can recruit more manufacturing into Canada, or for Canadian business people to take that risk so we can support ourselves a little bit better and not rely on the outside world.
Hartung says there is a big difference between manufacturers in both countries and thinks more manufacturing in Canada would provide an economic boost. A person's in hospital after being assaulted with a weapon early this morning. Police were called to the 100 block of Osborne in the Village around 5 this morning. They say there were multiple witnesses. Officers expect to be in that area, the 100 block of Osborne, for much of the day. Donald Trump's freeze on U.S. aid international research funding is threatening an outreach program between the University of Manitoba and sex workers in Nairobi. For more than 40 years, scientists in Winnipeg have partnered with vulnerable people in Kenya who have HIV. Professor Julie Lajoie says 50,000 people get AIDS prevention drugs through this program.
Human lives are right now at risk because if you live with HIV and you cannot access those drugs, the virus is going to come back really quickly within a few weeks, and then it's your life that's at risk.
Lajoie says the teams are scrambling to find private funding to pay for a month's worth of pills for all the participants. She says the program has been getting $1.5 million a year. Lajoie says if the program stops, people will die and HIV will spread in Kenya. A local housing developer says it can build a project next to the Granite Curling Club quickly, in time for the City of Winnipeg to get millions from the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund. Jeremy Reid is head of the University of Winnipeg Community Renewal Corporation. He says the affordable housing project would be modeled after another nearby building. The West Broadway Commons on Colony was a joint project with All Saints Anglican Church.
They've understood that we've been willing to do that kind of revenue share, and that we would be open to the kind of arrangement they were thinking of for this site to support the granite curling facilities that they own.
A hearing on the project is set for this morning at City Hall. The Curling Club's board wanted the city to delay this hearing. It says it doesn't object to the housing project, but worries the loss of parking will hurt membership. They want an agreement providing financial support. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he supports President Trump's proposal to move people from Gaza out of the territory during reconstruction. Netanyahu made the comment during an interview last night on Fox News.
This is the first good idea that I've heard. It's a remarkable idea, and I think it should be really pursued, examined, pursued, and done, because I think it will create a different future for everyone.
Trump says he wants to permanently relocate Gaza residents, but the White House now says it would be a temporary measure. Following the United States, Israel has now announced it is withdrawing from the United Nations Human Rights Council. The council is an international body created to protect and promote human rights. The Israeli government claims it has an institutional bias against Israel. On Tuesday, President Trump signed an executive order removing the U.S. from that council. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Well, while most of Canada, including Winnipeg, spent a good part of January in the deep freeze, that wasn't the case elsewhere. In fact, European Union scientists report last month was the hottest January ever recorded. One of the authors of the study is Samantha Burgess.
When we look at air temperatures across the globe, we've seen really large anomalies, particularly over the Arctic region, where those anomalies have been 20 degrees above average. So that's a huge anomaly. So that combined gave us an insight early on in the month that January would be much warmer than average.
Burgess says the average global temperature over 18 of the last 19 months has stayed more than 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial times. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, not due to warmth, but due to stormy weather, we have a list of school cancellations to tell you about and buses affected in divisions. I'll read this out and then I'll just point to our website because this list does live now at cbc.ca/Manitoba. But right now, here's what's canceled. All schools, all buses completely shut down in Prairie Spirit School Division, Fort LaBosse School Division, and Turtle Mountain School Division. So those three, as well as Lakeshore School Division. So 4 completely closed. Prairie Spirit, Fort LaBosse, Turtle Mountain, Lakeshore. Then, Beautiful Plains School Division has no buses, but school's on. Rolling River has no buses, but school's on. Mountain View, all buses canceled, but you guessed it, school's on. Finally, in Brandon School Division, rural buses aren't running, and these schools are closed. Alexander, O'Kelly, and Spring Valley. Also in the DSFM, these schools are closed. École La Source, École Notre-Dame de Lourdes, and École Gilbert Rosset. As mentioned, that list is online. Here's Abby now with our weather.
Chilly day across the province with snow and drifting snow in the southern region. Colder temperatures as you head to the northern parts of the province. For Winnipeg and surrounding areas, we're looking at temperatures around -15, -16 at this time. -15 at the Forks, light snow and drifting snow being spotted in the city and open areas. Expect more of this light snow and blowing snow this morning. That should ease into a mix of sun and clouds by the afternoon period. Windy conditions will come from the west, but that should come later. We warm up to a high of -12 for today, though the wind chill makes it feel colder. Similar conditions in the Red River and Pembina Valley regions, we're seeing temperatures around -18 at this time. Heading west to Brandon, we're seeing temperatures around -18. Light snow also blowing in that area. That should improve to a mix of sun and clouds later in the day. Highs around -13. Dauphin, similar, -17. Light snow also blowing, reducing visibility in the Parkland region. That snow should ease by the noon period, followed by a mix of sun and clouds. Highs around -13. In Gimli, temperatures around -15 at this time. We have snow falling there, and that's blowing around. That should ease later in the day. We do have a mix of sun and clouds in the forecast, and that warning for Lake Winnipeg and surrounding areas, you should take note of that. In the powerful influence, we're seeing temperatures around -16. Expect snow and cloudy conditions. High -12. Thompson -17. Light snow. High -11. Up in Churchill, we're seeing also light snow in that part of the province at -12. The high should be around -24 later in the afternoon. So it's like light snow, a mix of sun and clouds, and of course a blowing snow.
All right, Abby, stick around. I want to ask you a fashionable question in a minute.
Okay.
I think you'll like it. Corey Funk first, the commute. How are we doing?
Yeah, here in the city, a couple things to keep an eye out for. Northbound Osborne all morning. There's been police vehicles blocking the northbound curb lane between River and Stradbrook. So that might be some slow going through the village this morning. As well, southbound Main at James, there's a stall blocking the curb lane. So keep left to get around that. Also just got a call from someone on the commuter line who just said it is a skating rink out there here in the city this morning. He slid right into like halfway into an intersection. It was like, whoa, what's going on? So he called to just give people a heads up that you want to give some more space, go a little slower than maybe you normally do. Out on the highways, as you probably picked up from the bus closures and things like that, that it's not ideal conditions out there. Poor visibility pretty much right across southern Manitoba this morning. Snow coverage on those highways, so just be careful out there as well. If you see anything else though going on, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
So let's talk fashion. Corey Funk, you in on this chat?
Yeah.
Why are you laughing?
Well, like, look at me. I'm just wearing like a shirt covered in potentially some baby spit up. So I don't think I'm going to be much help, but we'll see.
We've got an item coming up on African Fashion Weeks next weekend. But Abby, people might not know this, but Abby, you've designed clothing in your life too.
Yeah, I do. I do design most of my summer traditional attires. I do the designs and I send it to my buddy in Nigeria, and he does the stitching together for me.
So, like, where's that coming from? Because I just got to ask, Corey, have you ever seen, did Abby show you the pictures of, like, I think it was your brother's wedding? Like, it was the most beautiful thing I ever saw in my life. Everybody, not just the bridal party, bride and groom, everyone looked like perfection.
To the nines. Yeah.
Yeah. Where's that come from?
It's a traditional thing, that spirit of uniformity, and you see the people having that event, and something happy is happening in this this small community, and they're all, you can just tell that it's a joyous event. So even when they're celebrating death, like at a funeral, people still dress up and they look good because it's more like a celebration of life and not mourning the departed.
But you identify fashion as being, has a cultural tie for you.
Yeah, it has a cultural tie for me. It narrows it down to the parts of the country I come from. Just still, when I do my designs, I try to narrow it down to the western part of the country back in Nigeria, because
so it's a regional look to
it's
what
a
you're
regional
doing.
look. Like you see some of my designs would have like maybe this cocoa leaf or a plantain peel, and just you see it and this is from that part of the country.
I just, Corey, look at Corey and I listening and soaking it all in and being envious, maybe. I shouldn't project on you, but I am.
No, yeah, when I choose my clothes, I'm like, this smells good. And then I'll put it on.
There's there's obviously a lot of style regionally in a lot of different countries around the world. That's not all that new. I just think it's so beautiful. And you were talking, Abby, also about the different fabrics and stuff and the regional representation there just now. What I'm curious about is how quickly do you start, like, knowing that? Like, are you a little boy going to school and you're already sort of understanding that you're dressing to the nines?
We grew up in a setting where there's always a celebration. You see your parents dress up, and most parents, they're not just dressing up to show. They're also like, this is my kid. My kid looks good in this attire. So there's always a preparation of not just the adult preparing. You'll definitely see what you see on a grown-up person. You see a baby also have the same style, like the agbada, which is like it's kind of some heavy fabric, right? And you'd see a dad would make an agbada for the kid. A dashiki, which is just a shorter sleeve. A dad rocks a dashiki. The baby would also and then if it's the mom rocking the boo-boo with the big sleeves, you see the daughter also rocking the boo-boo. The mom rocking the headgear.
Did you say boo-boo?
Yeah.
I want to rock a boo-boo.
It's like booba and gilly, but the nickname is a boo-boo. So you see the boo-boo, the mom will rock it, and you see the baby even killing it beyond what the mom would do.
It's all so beautiful. Like, it's all so beautiful. Corey, you got to get your kids some things that...
We got to match.
You have to get Cal a dirty sweatshirt then.
He's got a few of those.
Okay, don't do that. Okay, so we are leading somewhere here. Thank you, Abby, for sharing. I love this. I love all things fashion, and I also love learning. But in a moment, we're going to take you to a local story we have about African Fashion Week that's coming up here in Winnipeg. But first, Heather came in during us chatting there, and there's an addition to this list that I mentioned about school challenges. So it's just one to add. Because of poor road conditions, Southwest Horizon School Division has also said that buses and classes are canceled right now. So staff are assigned, to work from home. Staff assigned to work from home in the Southwest Horizon School Division. Hiccuping, pardon me. Let's take you to Fashion Week. When we think of fashion in Canada, a lot of people actually don't think about Winnipeg. They might think about Toronto or Montreal, but there's so many clothing designers that are based in our city. On Saturday, some of those designers will be showcasing their talents for African Fashion Week. Here now is that story.
I'm Shanley Vidal, and I'm here at the home of a Winnipeg fashion designer who's getting ready to showcase her style and her Nigerian heritage.
My name is Kofoworola Morgan Yusuf. I am a dressmaker here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I'm getting ready for the African Fashion Week to celebrate Black History Month.
I've been watching it.
Maybe not very many people know about our culture. There are a lot of us here, and I know that for every Nigerian or every African they see wearing our clothing, we are always calling attention because it's not normal. It's not usual from what they wear here. And now we're bringing it we want to make it normal. So anytime I'm going to work and I'm wearing one of my pieces, they ask me what the occasion is. I'm like, this is my regular outfit. And they're like, okay. So now they're used to it. Oh, Kofo would show up wearing, orange or something very colorful, flowery. I've noticed lately that our young teenagers don't want to wear our kind of fabrics, but then I thought of why not have it in styles they would want it. It's also what is trending in Nigeria now. So I also wanted our teenagers here, young adults, even the adults themselves, have a feel of, yes, we can be very far from home, but we're still close to home with what we wear. And then one hand in your pocket. Yeah. See? Perfect.
That love of fashion began at a young age for Morgan Yusuf. As a child, she saw her grandmother dressed in colorful outfits with matching headscarves. This inspired her to study fashion.
I was so passionate about it, and my instructors then were like, you need to slow down, you're going too fast. I'm like, this is what I want to do. Because I am African, I am a Yoruba girl, I am drawn towards using our traditional fabrics. I mean, fabrics like ashoke, fabrics like Ankara, damask. What I'm putting on is a mixture of ashoke and adire. So they're two different fabrics with different textures. And if you see it the way I have combined it, it looks good together.
Hi, my name is Isaac Gillen. I'm the CEO at African Fashion Week Winnipeg. So
something brighter than this, or?
Anybody from the diaspora that is working in the African industry, so we'll be presenting there and showcasing their work, pretty much in fashion, in art, in music, and dance. So we're hoping to have like a beautiful celebration of African heritage. Okay, now dress somebody.
Gellin grew up in Paris, where he worked as a model. He says barriers limited his growth in the industry.
The lady said we had one black person already as a model. So if we take you, that means we won't have a job for you. He said there is nothing about racism. It's about there is no market for black people. From the moment I know, okay, I have to create a platform. It's about diversity. It's about inclusion. So where everybody is welcome. It's not about color. It's about race. It's about talent.
As long as you like fashion, you like culture, no, it's for everyone. And I feel for you to live in this kind of place that is cold and everybody just wants to sit at home and wear blue, black, and dull colors. I mean, we can brighten up the day by wearing some colors.
Kofo Rarola Morgan Yusuf is one of 7 local designers who will have their work featured at African Fashion Week Winnipeg. Shanley Vidal, CBC News, Winnipeg.
So you've been listening to that story, but if you also want to watch it, check it out because the video is just beautiful and you'll see all the colorful fabrics. And also keep an eye out because Abby was teaching us while we were watching it on our YouTube stream this morning. You're going to see someone's face on one of the fabrics, and that could be to celebrate either a birthday or it could be also to honor someone who's departed, because sometimes the image is actually printed into the fabric. African Fashion Week, takes place on Saturday. It's at Centre Culturel Franco-Manitoban. And if you want to check it out, you should go on Saturday.
Have you visited CBC's Being Black in Canada website? It's an online platform to explore the stories and experiences of Black Canadians across the country. A space for news, documentaries, arts and culture, Black achievement in sports, and so much more. Celebrating a uniquely Canadian perspective on Black issues with the cultural moments that matter to Black Canadians. Visit cbc.ca/Being Black in Canada.
Time right now is 11 minutes to 8 o'clock, and coming up after 8 o'clock, as the Trump administration cuts swaths of government spending, a University of Manitoba research team working on HIV/AIDS prevention in Nairobi is at risk of losing their funding, as you've been hearing in the news this morning. We'll have a full interview about that, and we'll also hear what it means in the fight against HIV/AIDS. So that's coming up after 8 o'clock on the show. Right now, let's talk about tariffs. For some, the 30-day pause on threatened U.S. tariffs is no longer a concern, but for others, the uncertainty is still, of course, very much top of mind. Lowen Windows and Doors manufactures their products in Steinbach, around 85% of which go to the United States. Next on our show, the CBC's Zabina Ahmed spoke to President and CEO Neil Fast about how a tariff would impact his business.
The greatest challenge with any sort of upcoming tariff is the uncertainty that it introduces into our supply chain. With our customers who may order and work on their homes months, if not years in advance, to upstream to our suppliers of aluminum and softwood that may be impacted by tariffs coming into Canada. It introduces so much uncertainty in all areas of the business. So it instantly makes our products much more expensive in the U.S. It may make our dealers less profitable. It will certainly make Lowen less profitable. And the worst case scenario is, of course, customers choose to buy from some other location. I think the tariffs can affect the business in a couple of different ways. As our products become more expensive, certainly we will sell less in the United States and make up for it by selling more in other areas. Our profits may go down, and that will potentially reduce the amount of cash that we would be able to reinvest in the business in the coming year. So we are doing several things to help mitigate the impact of the tariffs. We are certainly increasing the frequency of our shipments down to the United States while there are no tariffs in place. We are looking at sharing the cost of our tariffs with our dealer network and with our partners. We are, of course, managing expenses closely in the business so that we can be prudent while times are so uncertain.
What about your workers here? Like, how are they feeling? Are they concerned, with this whole situation? Are they concerned that there could be some layoffs or not?
Of course they're concerned. We work really hard to communicate with our employees. Yesterday, we brought everybody together for a message. We had more conversations today as situations will change. Lowen has been through a lot in the past 120 years. 2010 was incredibly challenging with the banking crisis. Certainly a inconsistent trading partner will be frustrating for a business, but we've been through worse, and this certainly won't bring us down.
And do you think that you would have to lay off some of your employees if there would be like tariff imposed, do you think?
It's certainly possible, but there are several other actions that we're taking, and that would certainly happen first before we would look at layoffs. We have incredibly skilled employees, and frankly, we would not want to lose a single one of them to layoffs if we have any other choice. Certainly the biggest challenge in Canada is the amount of interprovincial trade barriers. By some estimates, they are as damaging to the Canadian economy as a 25% tariff. We have different adoptions of energy codes in different provinces. Our tradespeople, our healthcare professionals have different certifications. Of course, there are challenges shipping products like alcohol across the border. If our provincial governments and federal governments could work together to addressing all those issues, it will make buying locally Canadian-made products much easier for everybody.
The Premier is also talking about Trump-proofing the Manitoba economy. What would that mean for Lowen?
The Manitoba economy and Lowen particularly, we will always be strongly influenced by what happens to the U.S. As we can work to selling more into other provinces, selling more to countries other than the U.S., Lowen would certainly jump at those opportunities.
And since there would be a lot of profit losses, you mentioned, and 85% of your exports go there, are you thinking of looking at other export markets other than the U.S.?
Certainly. So we export to the Caribbean already. We still have small businesses in the United Kingdom and Japan left over from when we were shipping much more there in the 90s. There are certainly other markets that Lowen could export to. We would love to sell more in the Canadian market. We will certainly be bringing attention to our Canadian brand in the coming months and coming years. And yes, any product that we can move away from unreliable trading partners into Canada, we would appreciate it. But we have a wonderful relationship with our U.S. customers. We are committed to the U.S. business for the long term, and we have no doubt that particularly tariffs at the levels that were threatened a few days ago, those are not something that will be in place permanently. Trade is one of those wonderful things that everybody wins. There doesn't need to be a winner or a loser in bilateral or trilateral trade, and Lowen and frankly many other Steinbach businesses and Manitoba businesses have really benefited from that. And it benefits the U.S. consumer, it benefits Canadians, and we fully expect to see that going forward.
What are the alternate ways of doing business with the U.S.?
Lots of Manitoba businesses have manufacturing facilities in the United States. That's something that is challenging for Lowen. We have an incredibly skilled workforce and a very high quality handcrafted product. It would be incredibly challenging to move everything that you see in this factory down to the United States. We think that we are at our best producing here with such a great team and then shipping down to the US.
Neil Fast, President and CEO of Lowen Windows, talking from the shop floor there, Windows and Doors rather, talking from the shop there with CBC Zubina Ahmed about tariffs. Now, an interesting development this morning that was covered in our business news is that the Federal Minister of Transport and International Trade, Anita Anand, has said the regulations that are often criticized as barriers to trade between the provinces and territories could all crumble within a month. So in these next 30 days, obviously the federal government is going to be having some meetings and looking at what they're going to do next with some of those regulations that could free up trade across this country. So if you're a business owner out there, how could that impact your life? Are there markets that you would love to get into across Canada that have, because of barriers and regulations, not been available to you? So we'd love to hear from you this morning. 788-3205. That's the listener line, 788-3205. Time now at 3 minutes to 8 o'clock to check again with what's happening with headlines and Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, a freeze on U.S. aid research funding could kill a University of Manitoba outreach program that saves lives in Nairobi. For more than 40 years, scientists in Winnipeg have partnered with sex workers and other vulnerable people in Kenya who have HIV. The professor who runs the program, Julie Lajoie, says 50,000 people get AIDS prevention drugs through this program. We'll hear more from her coming up. And a person's in hospital after an assault with a weapon early this morning. Police were called to the 100 block of Osborne in the Village around 5 this morning. They say there were multiple witnesses and officers expect to be in the area for much of the day. I'll be back with more Manitoba News at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
We'll have that story in addition to In the News. We have a full interview on that research program that could lose its funding on HIV and AIDS, that research. So that's after 8 as well on the show. Right now in Winnipeg, we can tell you it's minus 16 this morning, and for the rest of our Thursday we're looking for periods of light snow, a high minus 12 and winds 20, but gusting to 60 a little later this morning. Could calm down by this afternoon, so very similar to yesterday. Snowfall warning still in effect, 10 to 20 centimeters expected through the interlake regions of Barons River, Little Grand, Bloodvein, and Atakaki and Poplar River. So if you're in those parts of the province, you're expecting more white stuff. And please go to our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba to see the list of what school divisions are closed today and what buses aren't running, most of these in the western part of the province because of yesterday's snowfall. Well, coming up on World Report, we'll get the latest in national and international news. Stay with us. It's 1 minute to 8. You're with CBC.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
There were a bunch of people that inspired Rufus Wainwright to write his first Requiem. Lord Byron, Verdi, and Puccini, his dog. Rufus will tell you why at the end of the day he realized what he was really doing was mourning the death of the American dream.
It's just this, collapse of what America was.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
We are in Windsor, Ontario today, a city that sits right across the river from Detroit. Its identity is tied to that border and to making cars and other things that cross from one country to another. A special show live from Windsor coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The Secretary General of the United Nations has a warning for U.S. President Donald Trump and his plans to take over Gaza.
In the search for solutions, we must not make the problem worse. It is essential to avoid any form of ethnic cleansing.
Antonio Guterres is calling on the UN to reaffirm its commitment to a two-state solution, but it appears the Israeli government is already preparing for some Palestinians to leave Gaza. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik is following developments in Jerusalem.
Facing winter winds and piles of debris, the frustration of living in Gaza boils over for Mohammed Abu Taima, trying to keep his tent from blowing away. Even with a ceasefire, trying to rebuild is a nightmare, says Gada El Cord. She admits even she has thought of leaving.
If we don't have a decent life as soon as possible, I think most of the Gazan here will think to leave and live abroad in a better life.
That is the debate in Gaza and in Israel now, in the wake of U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal that the U.S. remove some 2 million Palestinians to rebuild and redevelop what he calls the Riviera of the Middle East. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has ordered the military to prepare a plan for what he calls the voluntary departure of Gazans. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also seems to have embraced the idea.
I mean, what's wrong with that? They can leave, they can then come back, they can relocate and come back.
But Israel has a history of not allowing Palestinians to return, and settler groups have already drawn up their own plans for occupying Gaza. That's why Arab countries like Jordan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia have flatly rejected the Trump plan. For Riyad Mansour, the Palestinian representative to the UN, it's emotional.
We love the land of our country, whether we have palaces on it or destroyed buildings. We are determined to rebuild it.
But even if the ceasefire lasts, that could take years. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Israel says it is withdrawing from the United Nations Human Rights Council. It is the international body created to protect and promote human rights. On Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order withdrawing the United States from the council. Today, Israel's foreign minister says his country will do the same in light of what he calls institutional bias against Israel. It is decision day for millions of U.S. federal workers. Today is a deadline to accept a buyout offered by Elon Musk. He heads up the Trump administration's newly created Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. If workers do not take the offer, they risk being fired. The White House says it is keeping Donald Trump's promise to cut the bureaucracy. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington. And Richard, what is likely to happen today?
Yeah, it's fight or flight for the federal workforce. And it's believed roughly 40,000 government workers have accepted buyouts, which is far short of Elon Musk's ambitious goal of cutting roughly 200,000 jobs, or 10% of the federal workforce. So perhaps a whole new round of pink slips will be issued instead. Now, many legal experts are questioning the terms because those who accept the buyout have to sign a waiver agreeing not to take legal action. They're also skeptical if workers will actually get severance because it could be delayed by lawsuits. Now, in the past 2.5 weeks, we've seen Musk and his team completely dismantle several government agencies, from USAID, Treasury, Labor, intelligence agencies, the FBI, and CIA. Critics say this unelected billionaire is destroying institutions without congressional oversight or even a plan. Here's Michigan Senator Alyssa Slotkin.
They're trying to shrink the government. But again, when you start telling people that they're making these offers to flight safety instructors or the people who test our water, and they're not going to be replaced, that's the goal, right? People say, well, wait a minute, is there no rhyme or reason to the way we're doing this?
Now, critics are describing Musk and his team of 20-somethings that they're treating government like a tech startup, stripping each agency for parts and even gaining access to sensitive databases and intel of Musk's corporate competitors.
So what is Musk and DOGE expected to target next?
Yeah, there's new reporting this morning that Musk is targeting the National Institutes of Health and the Centers for Disease Control, and his team are reviewing their operations. Some agencies are now scrambling to get restraining orders, and more protests are expected later today.
All right, thank you, Richard.
You bet.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. CBC News has learned Canada Post is laying off dozens of managers. The Crown Corporation is financially strapped. In recent years, the volume of letters has declined and parcel delivery is facing competition. As Marina von Stackelberg reports, there is a big push to save money.
In Ottawa, workers at a Canada Post office hand customers their change as their company desperately tries to save cash. CBC News has learned nearly 50 Canada Post managers are being laid off this week. Nearly half of them are in Ottawa, but also in Toronto, Montreal, and other regions. Spokesperson John Hamilton says it's only internal managers losing their jobs.
To the public, this will largely be invisible. This won't impact their day-to-day mail.
Last month, Canada Post also cut 20% of its senior executive team. That included firing and replacing its chief financial officer. Hamilton says it's all part of company-wide restructuring.
It's an unfortunate reality based on the financial challenges we face, but it's also something that needs to be done.
Canada Post's finances are so bad, it was going to run out of the money it needed to operate by the spring. But the federal government stepped in last month with a $1 billion loan. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers has argued the corporation's money problems are in part because it's become too top-heavy. Jim Gallant is a national negotiator with the union.
I have no indication of how many managers they need. What I do know is that there are a lot of them. They get paid a lot of money.
Canada Post says no unionized employees are being laid off. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Another month and another record global temperature set. Scientists with the EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service say last month was the world's warmest January ever. It was 0.1 degrees Celsius hotter than the same period last year. The evidence surprises scientists who had predicted a cooler January. They thought last year's La Nina effect would bring global temperatures down. Samantha Burgess is with Copernicus.
When we look at air temperatures across the globe, we've seen really large anomalies, particularly over the Arctic region, where those anomalies have been 20 degrees above average. So that's a huge anomaly. So that combined gave us an insight early on in the month that January would be much warmer than average.
January is the 18th month out of the last 19 recording an average global temperature more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times. Scientists say the burning of fossil fuels remains the largest contributing factor to the warming climate. And climate change is having an impact on the push to build new affordable homes across Canada. A new study warns thousands of those buildings could be constructed in areas threatened by natural disasters. The Canadian Climate Institute says the threat could result in billions of dollars in damage. Inayat Singh has more.
Floods in Toronto last year drove home the dangers of climate-induced disasters that homeowners are increasingly facing. Now, a new report from the Canadian Climate Institute says thousands of new homes may get built in flood and fire risk areas. Report author Ryan Ness says governments need to step in.
Many provinces and territories don't use their full authority. They do not create regulations that limit the amount of construction that can occur in hazard-prone areas.
The fix is to direct development away from those areas and give information to municipalities and home buyers.
The state of flood and wildfire hazard mapping in this country is pretty poor. Maps that do exist are often dated by decades.
And billions of dollars are on the line because all those risky homes could cost homeowners and insurance companies big time. Charmaline Mendes-Millard is the director of flood advocacy group Partners for Action.
We're going to be facing and continuing to face so many events that are overwhelming our resources and systems.
A call to heed the report's warning so all those new homes don't cause a crisis of their own. Inayat Singh, CBC News, Toronto.
That is the latest from World Report. Listening to World Report is the easiest way to stay on top of the news, but we need help to get the word out. You can help by hitting the follow button on your preferred podcast app. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. It is Thursday, and it's minus 16 in the city right now. Thanks so much for joining us. A little icy out there. We've been getting calls on the commuter line. This is Information Radio, your morning show, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Well, this half hour on the show, we're going to explore one of the impacts of yet another development down south. Hard to keep up with all the announcements that are coming fast and furious. But as the new U.S. administration makes sweeping cuts to government funding, a research team here at the University of Manitoba is at risk of losing its funding for life-saving HIV/AIDS research. We're going to hear from one of the team members about what they understand about this moving forward and the impact that this will have, as mentioned. So stay tuned for that interview. Headlines in a moment. So for headlines, here's now Heather Wells.
Good morning. A hearing on an affordable housing project next to the Granite Curling Club is set for this morning at Winnipeg City Hall. The club's board sent a letter this week calling on the city to delay that hearing. They say they don't oppose the housing project that's to be built there, but they worry the loss of part of their parking lot is going to hurt their membership. A patient has filed a lawsuit over delays she says she experienced when she needed emergency surgery at a hospital in Ashern. The 56 87-year-old woman from Pinemutang First Nation says on an evening in January 2023, she was having headaches and started vomiting blood. Her suit alleges it took until the next day for hospital staff to send her to the Health Sciences Centre in Winnipeg. We'll hear that story coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's go to more details on the weather first. Abby Adiemi has those. Good morning.
Light and blowing snow will stay with us for most of the morning into the afternoon period. And if you're on the highways, this might impact visibility at some point. In Winnipeg, it is -16 at this time. We have light snow and some drifting snow in the city. Expect this light and blowing snow through the morning. It will be followed by a mix of sun and clouds this afternoon, getting breezy at times with that wind speed gusting all the way to 60 from the west, but the conditions should improve as the day goes on. The high for today will reach around -12, but be aware of the risk of frostbite because the wind chill this morning actually feels like -30, and then tonight we'll see some partly cloudy conditions, and we're expecting a mix of sun and clouds tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Let's get into now what the drive's been like. Corey, people are just saying it's just really slick in the city, right?
Yeah, I got a call from someone who says it's like a skating rink out there. He slid right into the middle of an intersection and was kind of riled him a little bit. So heads up there. A couple things to keep an eye out for on the roads this morning. The most recent being at Nairn and Chester. Emergency vehicles are blocking the westbound lanes on Nairn at Chester, so you can expect some delays going westbound this morning. I guess they're blocking it entirely on Nairn. As well, Portage and Linwood. That's eastbound Portage at Linwood. There's a multi-vehicle collision that's knocked down a traffic standard, and that's blocking the median lane. So heads up going around there. As well, all morning on Osborne, northbound Osborne approaching River. There's been police cars blocking the curb lane. So keep left to get around that. Might be some backups through the village this morning. And one other thing, southbound Main Street at James, there's also a stall in that southbound curb lane at James. So keep left to get around that. As for the highways, just very, very snowy on the highways. Heard from Thomas and Russell. There's fresh snow there. He said until the plow comes through, honestly, you might just want to avoid taking the highways altogether. And I do see that there's a plow kind of making its way from Russell to Roblin right now. So hopefully that's clear soon. But right now, not great conditions in far western Manitoba and just poor visibility kind of throughout the southern Manitoba this morning with that blowing snow. If you have any other updates for me, 204-788-3093.
Well, in parts of Manitoba, because of the conditions Corey's describing, there's been changes to buses and schools. So these divisions are closed today entirely. They are Southwest Horizon School Division, Prairie Spirit School Division, Fort LaBosse Division, Turtle Mountain School Division, and Lakeshore Division. Beautiful Plains isn't running buses, but school is on. Rolling River, same thing. Buses canceled, schools on. Mountain View, all buses canceled, schools on. And finally, Brandon School Division, no buses rurally. And Alexander, O'Kelly, and Spring Valley schools are closed. And the following schools in the DSFM are closed: École La Source, École Notre-Dame de Lourdes, and École Gilbert-Rousset. That is your list. It lives online. By likely you already know if your bus has been canceled, but just in case, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Does your funding come from the States, Julie?
No, so the research from the funding comes from different agencies, so mostly the Canadian Institute of Health Research, or CHR. Personally, I also get funding from CANFOR, so the Canadian Association Foundation for AIDS Research. But the clinical aspects, so the treatment for HIV, the prevention, the treatment for STI that we provide in Kenya in 9 clinics, comes from PEPFAR, so the President really Fund for AIDS Research. So that's come from the state. It's a $1.5 million a year that we have for operating 9 clinics that give prevention care for HIV, for STI, and treatment for a little bit over 50,000 people in Nairobi. Right now, as of right now, because yes, PEPFAR got a 90 days extension, but in Kenya, the fund were going through USAID, and USAID has been dismantled as of yesterday. We got told yesterday that we were no longer able to operate our clinics, which means that by Monday, our clinic have to be shut down. We are right now trying to see if there's a way to bypass USAID and get funding through another organization that the U.S. government will allow, because there's a 90 days extension on PEPFAR. but we are in an emergency crisis.
How much of this is a Trump cut, or was your funding threatened before this administration came in?
The PEPFAR program is totally a Trump cut. We knew when Trump was reelected that we will most likely see some funding cut through PEPFAR due to some ideology on gay men or trans individual. But in his first mandate, he had renewed PEPFAR, saying that that was important, and acknowledged the work that was doing on HIV and how it was important for the U.S. to continue providing that life-saving funding. But now we all know the situation is changing. We also know that there's a RFK Jr. that is trying to be the head of the health minister. We're saying that HIV doesn't cause AIDS, which is totally fake news. But it's a new world, and the pause was not expected.
How did you find out that you're going to lose this funding? Like, how were you informed?
It was said, last week we were all in Kenya for an annual meeting, collaborative meeting, and we saw the news that PEPFAR was probably paused. Then we received an email saying that all activity was to be shut down the day after. Then we fight it back, and on the Friday we were told, okay, yes, there's a pause, but there's an exception to the pause that was signed, but nobody kind of communicated to the CDC, to other agencies. So we were told on Friday to send a notice of stop of employment to all our employees. Then on Monday, we were told, okay, there's the exception, you can continue. And yesterday, USAID finally said, well, the funding comes through us, so you are shutting down.
What's it been like? I mean, did you follow through and inform employees then that they're out of work, that you stop programs? Like, what's this been like for you, and what's the fear like?
So right now, we are continuing until Monday based on the rules. We are trying to fight it. It is humanly unethical to stop our activities in Kenya, the clinical activities. So we're going to fight it to the bone. We're going to find a ways. The staff is for sure worried. But right now it's a question of when we talk. We had a community meeting on last Friday, and the question were like, what do I do? I'm pregnant right now. I'm a sex worker. I cannot access the publicity funding government facilities because of stigma, and it's not safe for me. But I'm living with HIV. If I don't have access to my drugs, my baby will probably be infected with HIV. I have a collaborator. She's a sex worker. She's on all my funding since I started a year and a half ago. She's been living with HIV for 20 years. She's been in the program for 25 years. She's telling me, I have 6 pills left at home. Next week, what happened to me when I'm running out of my pill that are helping me to maintain my viral load undetectable and then keeping me alive and healthy? What's going to happen to me? And it's heartbreaking question that we don't know how to address. We were certainly not thinking we will have to address those questions. And now we are in emergency, and we need to find solution to continue, whatever it's by another organism will take over, by a GoFundMe that will help us continuing for at least a few weeks to few months until we figure things out. It's humanly impossible to stop. It's life of people, and then it's also, if the virus come back and those who are infected with HIV, they are going to transmit the virus, and then we're going to come back to a world where HIV is not in control again, and we cannot let that happen after 45 years of fight against HIV to end HIV.
What you said there, I just wrote down to quote you. You said it's humanly unethical to stop, funding these activities in Kenya. What's your next step? Obviously, as you said, you're trying to find another funding source. You're not quite certain. You have until Monday to articulate this. But immediately today, what's your next step? Are you trying to plan meetings? And you said you're still pushing back. How are you still planning on pushing back against this?
Well, so the team in Nairobi right now I can tell you, I just had a text. They are right now in communication with USAID and with UNAID. So we are trying right now to see how can we have that 90 days exception that were allowed by the government. We are funded by PEPFAR. We do understand that PEPFAR funding was running to USAID in Kenya, but how can we bypass that right now for at least be able to operate for the 90 days? Otherwise, if that cannot happen, we are going to try to find whatever is by from us ourselves to put some money to continue the clinics a little bit longer. Some staff are paid by a research project. If there's no clinic, there's no research right now, but we do have some money to at least provide for the funding for those employees that we were funding by research. We'll put them in their clinical work instead of research. So we'll do our best to continue as long as we can until we figure out like a long-term way. But like I said, we cannot just stop the clinic. We might have to stop them for a few days where we're going to try our best that within a week we can continue, even if it's limited activity, that we cannot provide all the service that at least those who need their HIV life-saving treatment and those who need prevention get it.
Trying to do something, as I said there, Julie Lajoie. Thank you very much for being with us and telling us about the situation you find yourself in. Appreciate having you on CBC.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
That is Julie Lajoie, assistant professor in the Sex Hormones and Immunology Lab at the University of Manitoba, talking about a big challenge with their research team, to say the least. That's an understatement. They've learned their funding is going to be cut, the U.S. stream of it. They work on HIV/AIDS prevention care for sex workers in Nairobi.
Choosing a perfume or cologne is a form of personal expression. What you smell like says something about you. Pleasant scents, like a bakery, or something more earthy, like gasoline. How about a spritz of bacon? Strange Smells, the marketing of unusual fragrances, on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland, and on demand on CBC Listen.
I never understood that, Corey Funk, putting on bacon perfume.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, I don't think I would find that appealing.
Right?
No.
You're here to talk traffic. What's up?
Yeah, lots of things have changed in the last 10 minutes or so out on the roads. I'll update. You got a call from Ludwig. He said northbound Pembina, just at the Jubilee overpass. There's about 4 or 5 cars that seems to be all gotten a fender bender in the left lane. So keep right to get around that, and it kind of tells you just how slippery it probably is out there. Also, I was talking about emergency vehicles blocking westbound Nairn at Chester. So now there's one lane that's now open. They're now blocking just the westbound curb lane, but there's still big delays on Nairn at Chester. Also, a couple new things. Main and Broadway, there's a stuck transit bus blocking northbound Main in the curb and middle lanes. So that's going to cause some issues. That's Main at Broadway. As well, got a call from Janessa, northbound Archibald, pretty backed up right now. She couldn't tell why, but there's a lot of cars, more than usual, coming off of Tlingit. So that seems to be causing some pretty big backups there. If you have any other updates for me, let me know. Seems like it's very, very slippery out there today. I've heard it's like a skating rink from some callers. 204-788-3093.
This was like this 2 weeks ago. There was a particular Tuesday 2 weeks ago where it was just completely, you started and very quickly realized in the city this isn't normal winter driving, it's extra slick. So
yeah, that fresh snow makes a big difference.
Dust it up, right? Mm-hmm. All right, thanks, Corey. Take it easy out there, everybody. We've got a bit of music for you now from a show that's coming up actually tomorrow night. The Trues are playing Club Region Events Center tomorrow night, featuring Serena Ryder. Here they are with In the Morning.
We have to keep believing it's gonna be okay. 'Cause if we don't, we're lost. Maybe we're lost anyway. I wanna lift you up. I wanna make it great. I wanna be the boat that carries you across the lake. You push everyone away. But you don't wanna be alone. You still still don't know what you want. But you have to let that go and trust that the sun will rise in the morning.
I wanna get too close, I wanna be right there. It might all mean nothing, but I think that we're getting somewhere.
You push everyone away, but you don't want to be alone. You still don't know what you want, but you have to let that go and trust that the sun will rise in the morning. We have to keep believing it's gonna be okay. 'Cause if we don't, we're lost. Maybe we're lost anyway. At the end of the day, you don't wanna be alone. You still don't know what you want, but you have to let that go and trust that the sun will rise in the morning.
Serena Ryder, the Trues. I guess I should say the Trues featuring Serena Ryder. They're playing tomorrow night at Club Region Events Center. Enjoy the show. This tune's called In the Morning. We're going to let it take us right into our CBC Winnipeg News at 8:30. Or not. We thought there was 30 seconds left in that tune, but apparently it's rolling out early, which is all right, because I just want to remind you of the conditions out there. Corey was talking about how slick it is out in Winnipeg, and also to the west especially. There is also a lot of challenges with traffic, and in fact, some buses not running, as we mentioned, in some school divisions because of a lot of the snow that came down yesterday in that part of Manitoba. And now to your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, blowing snow in Winnipeg. It is minus 16 right now. The blowing snow will ease as the wind eases later today. In the afternoon, we'll be left with a mix of sun and clouds. A high today of minus 12. One of Steinbach's biggest employers knows the window hasn't closed on punitive U.S. tariffs. The looming deadline still weighs heavily on staff and management at Lowen Windows. President and CEO Neil Fast says tariffs would instantly make his products more expensive in the U.S.
It may make our dealers less profitable. It will certainly make Lowen less profitable. And the worst case scenario is, of course, customers choose to buy from some other location.
Fast says workers have voiced fears of layoffs during company town halls. He says that could happen if tariffs return. But the company, he says, will do everything in its power to protect the jobs of its roughly 700 skilled workers. Now, a lumber owner in southern Manitoba is feeling uncertainty around possible U.S. tariffs, and he says that his customers do as well. Joel Hartung owns the Zone Lumber Yards in 3 different Manitoba centers. He's been fielding calls from customers with questions related to tariffs, asking to secure orders for later this year. Hartung admits having more materials on hand longer will put stress on his company's cash flow and inventory management.
Lots of people are wanting to lock in pricing, so they want to lock in pricing for the project later, but they don't necessarily want to pay for it or are able to take delivery.
Hartung says the supply and demand issues stemming from the pandemic are part of the reason his customers are taking a proactive approach now to secure materials. One person's in hospital after being assaulted with a weapon early this morning. Police were called to the 100 block of Osborne in the Village around 5 this morning. They do not say how badly the victim was hurt. They say there were, however, multiple witnesses, and officers say they expect to be in the area for most of the morning. A patient has filed a lawsuit over delays she says she experienced when she needed emergency surgery at a hospital in Ashern. The 57-year-old woman from Pinemutang First Nation says on an evening in January 2023, she was having headaches and started vomiting blood. Her suit alleges it took until the next day for hospital staff to send her to the Health Sciences Centre in Winnipeg, where she had emergency surgery for a brain bleed. The lawsuit alleges another patient was sent to Winnipeg in the transportation requested for her, causing further delay. The allegations have not been tested in court, and the defense statements have not been filed by the doctor and hospital. A freeze on U.S. aid research funding could kill a University of Manitoba outreach program that saves lives in Nairobi. For more than 40 years, scientists in Winnipeg have partnered with sex workers and other vulnerable people in Kenya who have HIV. Professor Julie Lajoie says 50,000 people get AIDS prevention drugs through this program. She says their lives are at risk, and Lajoie is putting out an urgent plea for help.
With private funding, continue for at least a few days to make sure that participants can have drug for another month. Everybody that needs their HIV treatment can have it for another month during the time that we try to run a miracle.
Lajoie says the program has been getting $1.5 million a year. She says if the program stops, people will die and HIV will spread in Kenya. A hearing on an affordable housing project next to the Granite Curling Club is set for this morning at Winnipeg City Hall. The club's board sent a letter this week calling the city to delay the hearing. They say they don't oppose the housing project, but worry the loss of part of their parking lot will hurt membership. Jeremy Reed is the head of the University of Winnipeg Community Renewal Corporation leading this project. He says they want to work out a deal that provides support to preserve the designated heritage building.
Instead of a land lease payment, we would be making an annual payment in lieu of a land lease payment that would go into a heritage preservation fund for the granite curling facility.
Reed says the developers would include 15 parking spots for curling club members. You can find more news as it's updated throughout the day. Just head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Thanks to Heather Wells and Aaron Broman and Megan Ketcherson in our news department this morning. Also, thanks to our live team and to those folks who worked on specific items on Information Radio today. So they are associate producers, included are our live team members. So Corey Funk, Abby Adiyemi, and our YouTube producer, Kevin Ipatebo. Big thanks to you guys, always. Also, thanks to associate producers, Kalkadam Mulugeta, Sierra Sanders, Chidi Akuma, May McKillop, Carmen Ponto, Rosanna Hempel, Marshall Hodgins, and Dylan Longhurst, as well as Issa Kickson, Chloe Friesen, and Bruce Layden. Our CA reporters in unit are Shannalee Vidal and Jim Agapito, and our hosts in unit, Nadia Kidwai, Wendy Parker, and Donna Carrero. And I just realized I'm probably reading the long list of credits there, but it doesn't matter because everyone deserves tons of thanks anyway. So big thanks to everyone. Last look at the road. Corey, what's up?
Yeah, northbound Pembina in the left lane of the Jubilee overpass there. Just heads up, there's been a bit of a fender bender, 4 to 5 vehicles blocking the left lane, so look out for that. As well, Nairn and Chester, westbound, those emergent vehicles have now cleared. Also, Main and Broadway, northbound Main, there's a stuck transit bus blocking the middle and curb lanes. Very, very slippery out there today, so keep your wits about you out there on the roads.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Abby.
Light snow, blowing snow, and windy conditions across the province today. That should improve as we get into the afternoon period. Snowfall warning in the southern region impacting Lake Winnipeg. Most of the regions will see highs of minus 13 today. Winnipeg, we are at minus 15. We get to a high of minus 12.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening this morning. Always appreciate you being with us. Just a reminder, I'd love it if you'd reach out. You can reach out directly, radio893@cbc.ca, or call the listener line, 788-3205. Specifically, I'm really curious if you're a business owner in Manitoba, if interprovincial trade barriers improve or they're dropped, where would you benefit? Where would you start trading and doing more business in Canada? Talk to you tomorrow.